welcome to a special 40B edition of the North Andover Zoning Board of Appeals for Tuesday, June 30th, 2026. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First item on the agenda is acceptance of minutes from May 21st, 2026. Any commentary on the agenda, on the minutes? All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Seconded.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have
And
to roll
I'm
call?
an aye.
since
And
this is
yes,
over?
well, and Ms. Rutherford, are you an aye?
I am an aye.
Awesome. All right. It is unanimous. Okay. Well, I'm going to set the stage a little bit here. We are coming down what I hope is the home stretch. I think is the home stretch. We're going to talk a bit about an updated landscape and architectural plan. There's some minor details, mostly focused on the landscape. And then we're going to discuss the waivers. We're going to discuss the decision document. There's some questions that the board needs to answer in both of those, especially the decision document about how we want to word some things. I am going to ask Ms. Murray to give us a little bit of a rundown of what the decision process looks like and also what the aftermath looks like, depending on how we decide and how that could go. And I'm also going to have Mr. Shapiro, our planning director, talk a little bit about our housing stock, where we are relative to that 10% safe harbor, what saying yes and saying no potentially means for it, with the understanding that these are to some degree projections, and they are subject to some change. And I don't expect us to vote today. And the reason I don't expect us to vote today is that we need to make some modifications to the wording of the decision in particular, just because there's some thumbs up, thumbs down stuff that we need to give. And I don't want to try to rewrite this on the fly. I would rather have a final document that everybody has time to read before we make the decision. What I hope to do, however, if the board feels that we do not need any further input from the applicant, is to close the public meeting at the end of today, and that would then start a 40-day clock for us to deliberate and make our decision. And our next meeting is likely then to be July 14th at 7 o'clock. And Mr. Smolik, I didn't ask you for permission for that one because, like I said, I expect us to be closing the public meeting, at which point it is really only the folks on this side of the table that end up having to be here. The public will, of course, be invited to attend, but that will not be an opportunity for public comment, and it will simply be us deliberating with the help of our consultants. Any questions from the board members on that process?
Well, there were a couple of letters from abutters
Yes.
who were asking for other steps to be taken and more time added to it if necessary. So I'd like to give those some
Yeah. Well, and we should discuss
review and
those,
discussion
right. Yeah.
before we decide that.
And that's where, right, and I'm not asking for a decision now about closing the public meeting at the end of today.
Right.
But at the end of today, hopefully we'll have an answer to, do we need another meeting date, or are we good to go? All right. So with that, welcome, Mr. Smolak. And Mr. Steinberg, I know, is online. And I know we have some updates to the landscape plan, and so maybe we start with that.
Mr. Chair and other members of the board, good evening. John Smolak, attorney for the applicant. With us remotely are both David Steinberg, representing the applicant, as well as Dan Lasavita of Anaston Associates from our project team as traffic engineer. Also with us present this evening are Ed Bradford from the architectural team, Phil Henry of Civil Design Group, as well as Natalie Adams from Verdant Landscape Architecture. So this evening we thought it would be helpful And as to timing, as to how you'd like to handle it, is to revisit some of the context. That was what we were going to lead off with, but if you'd like to do something in a different order, it's okay with us.
I would like to start with the landscape just because that's the material thing that has changed, and then we can all be on the same material.
Is the monitor down here not working?
For those on in the audience and online, we have a TV down here, so when we're not looking at the thing back here, is because we can usually see it up here, and so we're just trying to make sure that that is connected. But it does not see. Oh, there we go. All right, now we can see it.
Is it in both places?
There it is.
Now it's in both
Hey,
places.
there we are.
All right, please continue.
Thank you. And at this point, I guess I would turn the discussion over to David Steinberg just to lead off on the landscape piece, and then have Natalie fill in as needed.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys can hear me okay?
You're a little quiet. You can turn it up.
Okay.
somehow.
Yeah, I'll see if I had something I
Perfect.
can change here and just
We
speak
fixed it
louder.
on our end.
Okay. Thank you. Again, David Steinberg, RCG LLC, representing the applicant Eastmont Housing LLC. Jumping into the landscaping discussion, I think as the chair mentioned, that was sort of became a more material part of the discussion last time we were before the board, and we had asked, based on some feedback in that meeting, our landscape architecture team to get back out to the site, do a more detailed survey of the trees, in particular where they were abutting 39 Prescott, and to provide some more information about our plans to preserve those trees, a tree protection plan during construction, and which trees were targeted specifically. And also there was some commentary then about being more specific about the trees that were on the back side of the sidewalk, essentially through Prescott Street, or the plantings, I should say the plantings, the combination of plantings, so there'd be a better understanding what that buffer would be like against Prescott Street. There was a little bit more work provided in the new plans too, and Natalie Adams of Verdant Landscape Architecture can take you through some of those that had to do with clarifying some other areas of plantings that were in our interior courtyard and along the face of the garage where it faced south. I think the biggest things were those first 2 points on the tree preservation, which trees are targeted for preservation and how we're preserving them. So John, maybe you can have Natalie come up and walk through a little bit. Now, I think those plans came through as part of the site set, if Barry can cue those up.
Yep.
Hi, Natalie Adams, Verdant Landscape Architecture.
Welcome.
I would go to sheet L 0.0. That is the tree protection plan.
It's at the end of the civil set. You're in the architectural set. If we could switch to the
Ah,
civil
there.
set, please. Oh,
That's reversed. Well, it's sheet L 0.0, and we captured the trees at 39 Prescott along the property line there. Anything over 6 inches of or larger was measured, and the sheet looks like this.
Okay.
And it's just that one corner that was surveyed by our
Yes.
team.
Okay.
Yep. And you can see in
There it
the rendering, they're mint-colored trees.
Yep, I
And
got
then-
it from.
Oh, you do. And then we also have outlined our tree protection fence and notes about installing tree protection. I could read through it, but it's pretty clear. And then under the tree survey is captured all of the trees here that were surveyed. There's 17 of them at that point, and then how they're surveyed, what DBH means, what CAL means. And then we also give notes under the tree protection fence about what's done in that area, what's allowed in the area of tree protection, and signage to keep people out. Basically, it's stay out of this area with heavy equipment.
And storing of material.
Oh, yes, yeah. it's, yes. And then also watering the trees, mulching the trees, and there may be a note about an arborist I had read somewhere.
I think
In the conditions, maybe?
conditions, it
Yeah.
said an arborist would be required to give a report if a tree needed to be removed. And that's one of the things that I was going to ask about when we got to the conditions. But, yeah, I don't know if we're ready to jump to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might as well pull that in if there's something specific that we want to discuss, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think my question on the conditions, and maybe this is a question for our council more than the landscape designer, but is it possible to put into the condition there that a certified arborist would also be overseeing the protection for the trees? Or is that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is your decision, so however you want to craft the conditions, it is entirely up to you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm wondering, like, is the plan outline in here enough authority, or is it?
I would think if you actually also want the work to be overseen by a certified arborist, I think we should put that in the conditions as well.
Okay, all right. And we can go over that a little bit more when we get there, but that was my one question, I think.
And I'm looking at the trees, and this probably is obvious to people who know more about this than me, but you know, some of the trees, so there's a bunch of sugar maples, black cherries that are native, then there's Norway maples that are invasive. I assume the plan is, despite the fact that they're invasive, to keep the Norway maples because they provide useful screening, or?
Yeah, correct, yep. You'll see under classification, native, invasive.
Right.
And then, we're protecting all of them. The action in the last
Yeah.
column is to protect, yeah.
Okay.
Do you have thoughts or feelings about the invasive versus native?
I know
Or
nothing,
just clarify.
so I'm looking for someone else to say this is important and I care about it and we should
Yeah.
talk about it more, but,
I mean, I'm really curious to hear what the abutters have to say, but I mean, this can be a little bit polarizing. I think in this case, the screening matters more than the invasives that we will never be able to effectively eradicate from our environment.
right,
at this
that
point.
is, yeah, I mean, my very amateur understanding is more that, like, because they're invasive, if someone had wanted to cut them down, there are less conservation concerns about keeping them from a conservation standpoint, right? But from a,
And if you wanted to plant them, you're SOL.
right,
Yeah,
but from a screening standpoint, they're still perfectly useful.
yeah. I mean, mature trees, yeah.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions on the landscape?
Did we talk about what the plant selection was along Prescott?
Yeah, let's move to that. That's the landscape plan that looks like this.
Yep.
I've noted the trees along Prescott Street, and you'll see UA, I don't know, you can't really see on that drawing, but if you have handouts, UA, IO, PS, 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 and those are all labeled and they key back to the plant list. So you can look at those. We are using, and if you turn to sheet L 2.0, down here in the lower left,
Yep.
there's buffer plantings. It outlines the name, the proposed height at planting, and then the annual growth rate, typical annual growth rate of those. And so we're using natives, white pine, a fastigiate white pine, which isn't straight species, but it's still valuable, and a couple of thuyas that are, one of them's, both of them are very valuable, but the green giant isn't a native, but it's extremely valuable because it grows very quickly, and I think it's useful. But I'll leave that up to you to decide on that. So if you look at the landscape plan, you'll notice that the mint trees of the existing trees at 39 Prescott are also added to. We added hollies, we added, the white pines, white pine. The hollies do very well in shade. So those are very, they're going to be very happy there because they're on the north side of the building, and we want the trees to grow well. And then we have a couple of larger deciduous trees because those are valuable as well. So, and then we also have that 6 foot, what I have on my plan as a 6 foot closed board fence at the abutter's property line. So there's a layered buffering.
And it looks like plantings are like basically just inside that fence.
Yes, yeah,
So at the top of the hill.
yeah. I tried to keep it nice and tight for them, yeah. And what have I missed? I don't. Oh, and I also continue down Prescott Street with the same buffer plantings to buffer the street edge at the building. I left it open at the amenity space. You'll notice it's just a little bit more open. There are arborvitae through there, but we could thicken that up if you prefer.
And it's just a little bit hard to tell on the very small
It
drawing
is.
here, but, so there's the sidewalk, and then there's a
Yeah.
retaining wall that goes down several feet.
That's right.
correct? And then there's plantings on the inside of it.
Yeah, we have 19 arborvitae along that edge from the mint trees at the top down into where the green playground is. And we also have a couple other types of thuya and a TPG, another type of thuya. So it's a blend, but it's I think more of thuyas at like a garden, more of a classical garden edge than like a pine tree, which is more a little bit of a rogue tree, you know, just it does what it wants to do.
Yeah. In the retaining wall, so like the trees would be planted, it looks like 10 to 12 feet high, and the retaining wall itself, it's like 3 or 4 feet, do we know?
Can you
That might not be-
high the retaining wall is there?
The inside along Prescott?
Yeah, so like the part of Prescott, by the end of the building that's furthest towards, like 24.
I can get that.
I guess that would be the deepest part of the retaining wall.
So the one, retaining wall 2 stretches from, the highest is probably 4 feet. And
Okay.
the zigzag wall stretches to about 8 or 9 feet.
Okay.
11 actually at the deepest part, which is in the courtyard, facing the courtyard.
In the courtyard. The amenities courtyard that's between the 2 wings of building, maybe, yeah, we can get him,
Right in here.
Yeah, okay.
okay. That's the deepest part of the retaining wall?
Yeah.
So the trees themselves would be 5 or 6 feet above the retaining wall is when they started.
Yes.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Where's the retaining wall gonna be, 11 feet? Did you say the retaining wall at one point is gonna be 11 feet?
Yeah.
Where is that on that drawing?
It was where I pointed.
Between these two.
Right. Yeah.
Right here.
Okay.
No, move your hand like
Further north.
down and to the right. Up just a little bit, right, yeah, right in there.
So that amenities courtyard has a bit of a tiered
That's right.
aspect? Gotcha.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, the courtyard is lower.
Gotcha.
So is there a railing or a fence on the top of that?
Oh, yeah, we have fall guards, yeah.
And is there a gap in the retaining wall or the fence to get out for foot traffic onto Prescott?
Yeah, so there's so like the wall does, and if you want to actually see the wall, the grading plan would be better, but the wall does this, and then this.
Gotcha.
And there's a second wall that runs along Prescott, along this wing, and the break in the wall is here, so that somebody physically walk, but we actually have, pedestrian access down here. But to
Yeah.
answer your question, these are 2 separate walls with the break right here,
Gotcha.
simply because we don't need a wall.
Right. it's probably a little bit moot. I mean, I drove by it. I think all of the existing trees along Prescott were pretty kind of like junky maples, but like, is the main reason why none of those could be preserved because of the retaining wall or because of the proximity of the building?
I think it's because of the retaining wall, isn't it?
Yeah, just the, yeah, the limit.
Because that's exactly where the
Yeah.
retaining wall would be, like right at the edge of the sidewalk, basically.
No, it won't be the edge, because these are cut walls, so it can't be up against the sidewalk.
Gotcha.
I think you need to come up to a microphone because
Sorry to keep asking you
No, that's
questions.
okay.
Yeah.
Phil Henry with Civil Design Group. To answer your question, so the street is higher, so to speak.
Right.
Than the development at that point. So it's, the retaining wall would be, you would see the wall if you were inside the development looking back onto Prescott Street. So
Right.
because of that, it's a cut wall situation. That wall can't be up along the sidewalk. But essentially, the limits of development stretch to the sidewalk, which is why
Gotcha.
some of those trees cannot be saved. But
Right.
but we're revegetating that area.
Yeah, yeah.
I think for Ms. Craig Coleman, I think what she is most lamenting is the loss of like big, tall
Yeah.
trees right at that edge, right?
Well, yeah, I was still thinking of like the renderings where there was like a mature tree in front of that end of the building. And yes, lamenting is a good word. But yeah. Can't grow where there's no more ground to grow in.
Can we look into that? Planting more deciduous street trees along that edge? Is that possible or no?
We could see.
I have to imagine it'd be difficult for the roots. Like there's just not a whole lot of
That's
space.
the issue. Like the roots. There's probably, on average, we'll call it 6 feet between back of sidewalk and back of wall. So.
So no.
Yeah.
No, that's a no.
And
That's-
even that is also like fairly close to the building. Like how far is that
Yeah.
space between the retaining wall and the sidewalk from the building?
Yeah, so that wall, the face of this wall, right, which runs parallel to this wing, that wall is probably 10 feet off of the building.
Yeah. So like most like mature shade trees are gonna have a spread of like 40 or 50 feet, which is
Yeah,
tough when you're 10 feet from the building.
yeah, so I think it's just not
Yeah,
feasible there.
that makes sense.
I think the roots would grow
Unless,
into
unless you move the building back. Give yourself more room.
No comment, right?
Well, there's a way to do it.
All right, Ms. Rutherford, do you have any questions or thoughts before we start moving on?
Not specific to this, thank you.
All right. All right, well, with the board's permission, I would like to thank you both, and we'll move towards the list of waivers. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great to me.
All right.
Is the parking share gonna be folded into the list of waivers conversation? Is that?
Yeah, actually, we can have that conversation now. So, I have some thoughts. And, you know, Mr. Smolak, we had a somewhat lengthy conversation last meeting about the shared parking. And, you know, something I asked for was a number. And a sense of like, what is the number that you actually need to be able to share in the lot? And at this point, let's be honest, you have not provided that number. And so I decided to do some hunting through the numbers. And I think I've come to a place where I think I understand my own frustrations a bit better, but I think I also understand why you feel like we are asking a silly thing. And so if you'll give me a moment, I'm going to monologue a little bit, and then you can tell me what I've gotten wrong here. But
I won't tell you it's a silly thing.
yeah. So I looked through the comprehensive parking study from April. And on page 32, there's a nice chart of the expected usage. And this is the expected usage, from what I understand, of all lots in the entire complex of buildings, right? And it has the average and it has different versions of average, and then it has the 85th percentile. And the 85th percentile is sort of the heavy use case. And so that range, the 85th percentile, overnight is a bit over 400. Now that's a lot, but the total allotment at the time that this was written in April, and I know the numbers come down, I think about 30 spots, but it was 939. So we have something like 900 total parking spots in the entire complex. And so what we're saying is overnight at its peak, we're looking at using up about half of those spots. During the daytime, so I'll take sort of between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. as kind of an analogy for working hours, times when people in the apartment complexes, both Zero Prescott and Avalon, are off at work to their maximum extent, and workers are in, and especially in the office areas, working to their maximum extent. And we're looking at about 250 parking spots. So there's a few ways to view that, right? I think from my perspective, where I am saying, okay, well, what's the most you could possibly want from the garage? One answer is 250, right? Because that would basically pack, during the middle of the day, everyone that is working in the entire complex into that garage. And if we granted you 250, that would be an ultra conservative. I would assume that nobody wants to park out on the not on the street, on the open air parking lots. The other way to view it is to say that we are enormously underfilling all of these lots, right? That at its most filled, half of these parking spots are being taken, right, across the whole thing. And so I think from your perspective, so from my perspective, I'm like, this is not, if we only granted you 250, it wouldn't really materially affect your ability to support parking in this area, right? And so that's sort of my end of it. But I think from your perspective, you're like, we're so underfilled, why is this even a discussion, right? And so is that before I go any further, is that a reasonable characterization of...
I think, and I'll because David works with this parking, has worked with it over the past 15 to 17 years, I'll let him speak to this issue. But I will say that, I think it is very clear about how many parking spots are vacant, throughout the day. Yeah. And I'd say that, David has been very successful in managing the parking throughout the complex and has done so over these years. And the planning board has granted us that right to share those parking spaces throughout as part of those approvals, because of the fact that they feel that David could most effectively manage the entire complex. And that's the reason why. It's not to be a situation where we're trying to gather new spaces to support the non-residential uses at all. And that's the reason why we had proposed the draft condition, as you see it in the decision, to allow, to the extent that there is a bump in new parking resulting from the commercial uses, then that is something that would be subject to planning board review in the normal course. So that's the reason. But I'll let David Steinberg elaborate on that if you'd like.
Yeah, well, one thing, I think the understanding of how the parking is used is essentially correct and updated, and explains why we're asking for flexibility in how we manage it versus, that we're providing more than enough parking to satisfy all the uses on the site. The challenge is more the history of the different special permits and shared parking that was allowed on different sites. And I think, as Ms. Barrett noted in the last meeting, there's really a heavy requirement for every type of use in town. And so those special permits were predicated on really exorbitant uses that might be required. And the existence of this parking lot as a shared parking lot acted as the absorption for all of that for zoning purposes, more so than for practical purposes. And so what we're trying to do is, and we've never had any need or reason to go back to revise those zoning requirements, because we always had the parking garage and knew that was going to be a phase we were going to develop at some point, and it would have shared parking uses. So I think as John was pointing out, we're trying to frame this as something, we're not trying to sneak in some way to get extra projects out of the garage. What we're trying to do is resolve the fact that there are different properties all sharing this garage now, or this lot now, that have history of zoning requirements that were sort of all over the place and revised at different times based on, small projects we're doing, changes in use, how you were counting street parking, for instance, in the sub-district A, when that changed, when the lots changed, when we did the subdivision. And so it's a pretty complex challenge to piece together all the parking that was required by previous zoning approvals.
Yeah.
And since we have more than enough to satisfy it in a practical sense, it's to us important to say, well, that we can use it to handle those issues over time, that we're not trying to use it to, be able to build future apartment buildings by some trick of a waiver that we got from this project.
Or an indoor amusement park or something.
Yeah.
I think for me, reading the language in the conditions was very helpful because it was like, yeah, there's no potential for rude awakenings in 20 years without review. And then to parse the parking for shared use and not for shared use creates a logistical hurdle in perpetuity for no reason.
Yeah, well, and I think another way to put it is that I think a concern that was expressed by many abutters, and I think understandably and reasonably so, was, is this parking situation going to create a circumstance where people will be having to park out on the street, right? And I think one way to look at it is that the numbers here basically suggest that even if everybody in the whole complex parked in the garage and in the lot in front of Zero Prescott, that they could still fit. It would be tight, but they could all still fit. And so what that realistically means is that there is no circumstance in which people will have to park in the street, right? Like, I feel actually quite confident in saying that. That doesn't mean that people won't park in the street. That there's only so much we can actually control that.
But an en masse, habitual use seems unlikely.
There will not be a circumstance where someone says, I couldn't find a spot in any of the lots, and thus I'm going to park in the street.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question to the board, right, is we can decide to some extent how we want to deal with this. We can, as a board, try to push for a number, and 250 would be one such number that I don't think the applicant could argue would make the development unfeasible. But we don't have to impose that. And I think as one vote, I would suggest, I've come around, as someone in the last meeting who was pretty hard on this, I've come around to the idea that actually I don't think we need to. But I am open to opinions from the rest of the board on this.
Well, I think in the past, the planning board has given him the ability to move things around, and I don't want to screw up any of that stuff by putting a number on this one project, so, I think I'm fine with leaving it without a number.
Well, I primarily would want to do whatever could be done to protect the parking for the, current residents and businesses, but I don't see how one number or another on this makes a difference towards that. So
I feel like the biggest protection, if that were going to be a thing, would be for the town to make that street resident parking only for addresses on Prescott, permit only, yeah. But to me, logistical hurdles often have unintended consequences, and it could result in more parking in other places that are unintended as well. Like if the top 3 floors of the parking garage were for residents of this complex only, and other people from the other parts of the Mill District parked in all of the other spots, there would still be a dearth of parking, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. It doesn't seem feasible in this case, that it would make a material difference to the surrounding area.
Ms. Rutherford, do you have any thoughts?
It is a bit of a tangle. I am also concerned about the unintended consequences, but a number doesn't feel like it's going to resolve the problem, but something that will become a point of contention, unfortunately. I would like to see how this fits together with the rest of the puzzle pieces, but at this point in time, I don't have any numbers to recommend.
Okay.
I mean, I think the initial point for bringing up a number was, you know, in the event that there is a change of use, because we do have
Yeah.
numbers for current use. You know, we have those puzzle pieces that fit together
Yep.
with ample extra space.
And I think my concern there personally was that if we were close in terms of the actual being, you know, filling these lots on a regular basis, even like 70, 80%, then I would have some of that concern of like, okay, well then if they add something, are we just like creating trouble here? Right? But like, I think looking at the numbers, I don't see a world in which that happens. It would have to be such a massive change to that mill complex that whatever it is going to have its own review.
Right. And that is conditioned even the way it's written.
Right. It would have its own parking studies, and they would do this all over again. And
Right.
so, okay. All right. With that, let's talk through the waivers. Mr. Smolak, do you have a presentation that you want to go through on this? Do we want to just go through them one by one? What is your...
It's really up to your discretion, Mr. Chair. I mean, I made a couple of changes that we sent in a red line version
Yep.
the other day. I could go through those quickly, but most of them are language changes to just create some consistency with the other waivers. If it's not being presumptive, it's just that we wanted to word it consistently. What I did want to mention is on the red line version of the waivers on page 8, there was an earth removal waiver, and we felt that it really wasn't necessary if it was an exemption based on the grant of a comp permit. And so if the board grants a comp permit, then there's no reason for that waiver. So we eliminated that one.
Yeah, that was the one that we discussed last time. where
Right,
we were kind of
right.
like, okay, it needs to exist if we don't approve it, but if we approve it, it doesn't need to exist.
Right. So that makes sense.
Oh, is this the signage one?
No, is the earth removal.
It was just
Oh, earth
right before that, yeah. The signage modification was really based on some signage that we did provide in the plan set. And actually, Ed Bradford could run through that signage. I think it'd be helpful for the
Yeah,
board to understand
sure.
that and understand the nature of the waiver. I mean, the industrial district allows for some pretty extensive signage, and that's not the intent. Our intent is for the signage to be consistent with what's out there today, and because we want to keep the same theme among the East Mill and the West Mill, and that's what we're doing. And so if Ed if you'd want to have Ed present
Yeah, I think
those-
that would be
That would be
good place
great.
to go. Yeah, I apologize. I should have had that in the agenda as well as another item, but let's talk through it.
Yes, good evening, folks. Ed Bradford with the architectural team. And the signage, as John noted, the signage drawing is the last sheet of the architectural set.
Yep.
You're on it here, yes. So this sheet does identify the proposed signage.
The name's not actually going to be Zero Prescott, right? You'll have I assume some other name at some point.
I think that's fair to TBD.
Placeholders.
Dave should address
Yeah.
that one.
But my only
Zero
reason is
Prescott
that
is the assessed lots. We wanted for clarity through the permitting phases to use that name, but no, that is not our intent to use.
I understand. Ms. Murray, do we need to have some kind of wording in our decision that says that they are allowed to change the words on that sign? Because oftentimes when we cite a sign permit, we have a specific plan, And so I just want to make sure that you're not trapped into forever calling it Zero Prescott as the title of the building.
No, we appreciate that, and also I want to mention too that whatever we pick, we certainly want to make sure it's consistent with E911 requirements of the town as well.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to work that through the town as well, like any new address for a property.
So the best place to start here, just to set the table, is in the lower right-hand corner of this sheet. There's a little key plan. Just scroll up a bit. So this identifies in this key plan the signage that is being proposed, and that includes 3 building signs for building the residential building to the west of the garage. There's a building sign that identifies the main entrance to that building, and then the residential building to the east of the garage is a similar sign that identifies that entry, and then a third building sign that simply identifies the entry to the parking garage. And then the same key plan, the lower left-hand corner there, you can see text that says new monument sign. So that is a ground-mounted sign that identifies entry to the building for folks coming off of High Street. There's a second ground sign that identifies the project, although that sign, after discussions with Dave and the team, it was decided that the existing sign that exists today, existing directory sign, will be sufficient with some adjustments to the, of course, the text and the like that's on that sign. So that's an existing sign that's not shown on this key plan, but it's out at the curb cut from High Street, just about there. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand. So the monument sign you're talking about is here where the paths split.
Exactly.
Right? But you will also have a sign here?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
How big is that sign going to be?
That is an existing sign that's there today.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I do have.
Okay, but and does that not require any additional waivers or permits in order to maintain? Is it grandfathered in, or does it need a new one?
I think it's within the waiver language that we've submitted, and I haven't had the discussion with Attorney Murray, but we can certainly make sure that we.
Yeah, well, it's mostly a matter of I want to make sure we cite the correct
Right,
plans.
correct.
Right, and so even if the language is in the waiver, we need some kind of representation of it that goes into our final documents. So just want to put that in there. And neither of these signs are intended to be internally illuminated, I assume.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So while we're down at the lower part of this exhibit or drawing, to the left of the key plan does show the proposed monument sign together with its dimensions. So that, let me get the drawing here.
Yeah. And my first concern would have been it's, given its size, whether it was obstructing views of cars coming in and out, but because it's set back, right, it's not going to have too much concern there. The other one, how big is the other sign? The one that's there?
The existing sign, the sign itself is 4 feet by 6 feet,
4 feet.
and then it's attached to 2 granite
Pillars.
columns
Okay.
that support the sign, and that they're about 8 feet tall. The existing sign today. The proposed sign that you see in the lower left-hand corner is different dimensions, lower in its height. It's the sign itself is just about 3 feet, and it sits on an 18-inch base. The base is clad in brick with the intent of matching the building brick, so to be complementary to the building itself. And then the width of that sign is 8.5 feet.
I don't remember seeing this in there. Maybe it was a lot of information all at once, but did you look at like sightlines for traffic coming from like Avalon? If you're turning out of this complex, like looking back for traffic coming out of Avalon, does the monument sign get in the way?
The monument, no, because that's the one that's way back here.
That's right.
Right.
Which you mean,
It's
Right, but
the
if you're-
existing sign is the one that I'm a little
but if
worried
you're coming,
Right, but this is a new monument sign.
Right.
If you're trying to make a turn out of here,
about. Oh, I see.
and there's traffic coming from Avalon, is this in the way? I did get a head shake from the engineer, I think. Looks like.
I do have on a thumb drive here a image of that existing directory sign, if that's helpful. Pass that along.
But that's in a different location, right? The existing
No,
sign?
the existing sign that's.
Right, she's asking about the
along High
monument
Street.
sign.
Okay, the monument
yeah.
sign.
So, yeah.
Perhaps I can take a stab at it.
Yeah.
So let me use my pointer again. So what's not shown on this plan, and we could go to the site plan, but the stop bar that's associated with this drive aisle is proud of this new sign. And then obviously the drive aisle is proud of everything. So if somebody theoretically stops at the stop bar, they'll already be ahead of the sign that will be, they would have to look more than 90 degrees to the left,
Gotcha.
whereby the oncoming traffic would only be, say, 45 degrees to the left. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just asking because we've had a lot of discussions about signs,
Sightlines and signs,
obstructions,
yes.
and coming out of it. So we're just trying to understand it in the context of all of those.
Yeah, in that rendering.
Yeah, if you want to get a visual of this
Assuming
particular
that's,
sign,
you
the
know.
cover sheet rendering
Yeah, it looks like
does
parked cars
include it.
with
If you go to the
something
first
like
page of the
disruption
same
of the
set,
movement.
and you can see it there.
Yeah. So like we were just talking about that. It's like looks like parked cars along the street would cause more of a sightline issue than the monument sign.
Yeah, because if you're coming all the way out to this line.
You're past it, yeah.
Right. Yep. Okay.
And then if you wouldn't mind going back to the last sheet again, I can cover the building signs. And if you scroll just down a bit, there are the three colored views.
How is that monument sign lit? Up light, down light, anything?
Yeah, it's not internally lit, so there would be lighting cast towards the sign. So this shows the three building signs that I noted in the key plan. To the left is the entrance to Building 1. To the right is the entrance to Building 2. They're quite similar in their design. And then in the center is another building sign, as I noted, identifying the entrance to the garage. So this sign is proposed to be aluminum pin letters. The two entries to the residential buildings are simply attached to the canopies that are above those entries. And then the garage sign is applied to the spandrel beam, the wall, if you will, of the building. They're 18-inch high letters, and it says a generic sign at this point to be determined, but the height of the letters will be approximately 18 inches. And again, like the ground-mounted sign, externally illuminated, details to be determined, but what we've done on other projects is to have a kind of discrete hidden light that can be within the canopy shining towards the sign, and we're proposing something similar, again, not in internally illuminated letters, but externally illuminated with a hidden, likely LED light at the garage that could be just above and light the sign itself with a concealed fixture.
So shining from the canopy back up onto the signs, would that not also be shining directly into those windows right behind the signs?
Pretty subtle,
Okay.
pretty subtle lighting, yeah. So,
Okay.
no, that hasn't been our experience for this kind of signage lighting.
Okay.
And to your point, Mr. Chair, these are obviously placeholder signs, and we'll have to, to the extent there's any numbering, we'd be consistent with the requirements of the general bylaw for numbering of buildings.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it's just when we vote on this, we'll be citing specific plans. So I just want to make sure we have language that
Right.
allows you the flexibility to not put the word signage on your building for all time.
I think North Andover might develop its very own Wikipedia page for that alone if that has to go through, so.
All right, I do want to keep things moving just because I do want to make sure we get through the waivers, but if there anything else urgent with the signage, happy to entertain it. All right, thank you.
and just quickly, in terms of the other adjustments, what we did is we cleaned up the dimensional waivers in the waiver list as requested. The only other couple of items, just quickly, that I noticed in the IS district, there's a, for lot coverage, the requirement is 35, and we're at 34, so that's a no, there's no waiver required, and that's page 14 of the red line. Draft decision that was submitted to the board. And parking is something that was on page 17, but that is going to be dealt with as part of the decision, so we'll just have to make sure that's consistent when we get to it. And the other item was just on page 20 that were sort of requirements for industrial and residential districts. The residential district section wasn't really applicable, so we removed that language there. And then I think that was the extent of the adjustments to the draft waivers that we had run through the last time.
Ms. Murray, do you have any comments on these waivers?
Well, Mr. Chair, I did have just a few questions, perhaps for clarification, but I don't know if you want to go through them one by one and
Yeah,
arrive at the questions or comments at that time?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think we've discussed most of the content except for the changes, so.
Right.
I don't, if the board has things that they want to bring up with regards to some of those specific changes just outlined, we can talk about it, but otherwise I was gonna sort of lean on you a little bit with some of your questions.
So if we could just go to the cover sheet, if we could, Terry, please, of the waivers. So I just wanted to point out, and this was in prior drafts, but the last sentence of the very first paragraph that states, to the extent that the site development plans as approved by the board's comprehensive permit provide additional clarity as to the scope of the waivers granted, the applicant requests the board deem those waivers necessary for the purposes of the project, essentially. I just wanted to call the board's attention to that because that's typically something we refer to as sort of a blanket provision or a catch-all provision.
Yeah.
That in the event there is something like, for example, we were talking about retaining walls earlier, and let's suppose you needed a waiver, retaining walls, you needed a waiver for anything that's, say, above 4 feet high. And we think we've captured that in the waivers, but then you actually look at a plan and maybe there's an additional small retaining wall somewhere that is, 4 feet, 3 inches tall or something. That kind of language is designed that if it's shown on the plans.
It's okay.
And we've approved the plans, we have essentially approved the waivers.
Yeah.
But I always like to point that out because some boards that I've dealt with don't like those kinds of catch-all provisions. They like everything to be spelled out in the table, so.
Yeah, and
that's
there's a
really
number.
a matter of your preference.
And there's another number of cases here, right, where it says as shown on the site development plan.
Right.
Right, and we asked last meeting for more specifics there. And again, this is a case where we haven't gotten those more specifics. So, Mr. Smog, do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I think that, in terms of the decision itself, it does identify, I think the language in the decision regarding waivers does cover these circumstances. And in this cover sheet, I was expecting that was not going to be included in the waiver list. That would be attached to the final decision anyway, so I'm okay with that. In terms of any specifics that you were looking for, just let me know. Perhaps we can go through them, but I think.
I mean, look, my
I'm happy to try to-
stylistically, my preference would be, for example, maximum lot coverage, maximum FAR. It just says waived, and it'll be depicted on the site development part, right? Like, my preference would be to say, we are accepting a lot coverage of X, even though the normal limit is Y, right? Like, that to me would be what it would make it, because I think one of the things from a board's perspective, right, and this is not necessarily impactful of what gets approved and what doesn't from like a material perspective. From the board's perspective, it's a lot simpler for us to understand what's a big ask and what's a small ask when we are faced with that literal number, right? So if you tell me the maximum FAR is 20% above what it otherwise would be, that's different than if you're asking for it 5 times what it would otherwise be. And so,
Especially since we have stacks of paper that are filling boxes at this point, to go through and try to refer to the correct plan at the correct moment of this development is tough.
Yeah, what else complicates things is that we're dealing with 3 separate districts, and so I think that town council has drafted a condition that captures how the waivers could be treated. And I think that, in terms of the actual numbers, I think the numbers as revised are currently accurate for those 3 districts. And realistically, the sub-district A requires a special permit, and so it's there for illustration, like I explained the last time, simply because of the fact that had we gone with the conventional route, that's the zoning that we would have applied in that circumstance. So I guess for all intents and purposes, that could be eliminated,
I mean, I sort of think of it as 3 different categories, right? There's 3 categories here. One category is things that are directly applicable in, as you said, it's 3 different zones, but in each of the zones, right? So setbacks would be an example of this, right? That one area is going to have a setback of this amount, one area is going to have a setback of this amount, the building has this amount, and we can compare those directly. Okay. Another version is a situation, say, like maximum lot coverage. As you said, it's over 3 different lots. Each of those might have different numbers, right? But the reality is that there's a certain lot coverage for that whole lot. And at the very least, we can get the number for that whole lot.
Yeah, the only complicating factor in that is that we have 2 zoning districts that split the lot, and so
Right, but
you'd
these-
have to make an assumption that the lot coverage applies to the entire lot, I guess, and that's what I did in the waiver list. But
I think
I
Mike was
guess-
just asking for the actual number of lot coverage.
Right, so that's
what
I'm saying. This is that second category, right? The second category is to
Instead
say,
of the percentage.
okay, well, if it's going to be a little too messy, right, to try to extract that out of multiple lots, one way we can do it is say, treat the whole lot as a unified whole, and just tell us what the number is that we're approving, right? What's the lot coverage that we're approving? The third category is one where there may be circumstances where neither of those are possible, and in that case, we may have to rely on saying, see the development plan. But I do think a lot of these fit into that second category, where it would be difficult to maybe deconvolute how much contribution and how much overage we're voting for each of those districts. But you can still give us a full number. And so if you, that way we say the FAR is 70%, and we know that we're saying 70% rather than 20%.
I also think if there are discrete plans that are included that can be referred to as as depicted in this part of the plan, that could be helpful
Yeah, citing
for
a
us.
page,
Yeah,
a specific document.
Right. And that would be the site plan, as sheet 4 of the plans, and so we could be more specific with that regard. And I guess what I'm hearing also is that, sort of like how you draft your variances, maybe what we're doing is eliminating what doesn't require waiver,
Right.
and then just identifying what does require waiver. So
Right.
so basically, you're asking for a 20-foot setback, for example, where 30 is required or something like
Exactly.
that. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Because it, like I said, it just makes it easier for us to have
Right.
confidence that we know what we're voting on, and that we know what we're saying things.
Okay.
Remember, we have not done this before, so as much information as possible so that we don't
Yeah.
stay up at night combing through every single
Yeah.
page of this and continuing to pester with questions.
Yeah, and the particularly challenging piece of this is when you're dealing with a lot that's split by zoning, and then you have another overlay on top of that. So that's why it's much more complicated than it usually is.
No, I
But
understand.
Totally,
we
but
could certainly
can
simplify
outline
that,
what
sure.
the actual plan
Okay.
says,
Yeah.
and then we can compare it to what the various zoning says.
And I'm willing to accept that, like, a perfect chart, right? Like, to your point about how we would normally do variances, a perfect chart of like, this is what we would ask for, and this is what you would normally be able to do, and this is what we're asking for, may not be possible in all cases.
Right.
But I would like to get as close to that as possible, and then accept, the fuzzy, not even fuzzy lines, because what you're asking for is something that's specific. It's just the ambiguities with regards to the fit within our normal bylaws.
And if I could just add to that, Mr. Chair, eventually, the applicant is going to be seeking building permits. So
Right.
it isn't just what we all agree upon tonight or 2 weeks from now,
Yes.
whatever. But if there's a set number, even if we have 3 different zoning districts identified with the requirements and what's being offered, but we ultimately land on the setback from Prescott Street is granted at X,
Right.
it leaves no ambiguity for the building inspector, say, a year from now,
Yeah.
when he's reaching out to the zoning board to say, what did you mean on page 13 of your waivers?
Yeah, and our building inspector is very talented, but he's also very new. And so I don't want this to be his first. Yeah, yes, very new in North Andover, not to the job in general, but new to North Andover. And so, I want to make his introduction to working with us as straightforward as possible. So I appreciate that as well.
This may be a very simple question, but on the first waiver here, the bylaw mentions a sewer service connection fee. The waiver doesn't mention that. Is that just an administrative thing?
We did discuss this a little bit last time, because I think I asked whether they were seeking a fee waiver, and we should confirm for the record, no waiver from that fee is being sought, correct?
Correct.
So does that verbiage need to go into the waiver itself?
We had stricken that language that was in the last version, and the version that you have now does not mention a fee at all, a fee waiver at all, so.
Okay, so if it doesn't explicitly mention a fee waiver, then it's acknowledged by all parties
We can
that there's no.
likewise also add in
Specifically that the
there
fee
is no
stays.
waiver of fees.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it lists this and it says what it is and it says waived and it sounds like it's
Right,
waiving that
that's
whole thing.
Right,
Fair enough.
So
at least from a layman's perspective.
That's fine.
we had the same
It's
first
a few
comment.
more
Laura.
words to put in. I think that was the only one that referenced a fee,
And to be clear, like, an example of the screening and I do think, for example, the screening and landscaping to be shown is on the site development plans. I think that's probably just gonna have to be that way, right? I don't think you need to put a table of every tree and every plant that you're gonna put in there
Thank you.
into that waiver. I
In
think
part
that would
because
be.
like the reality of actually planting a tree on an exact spot before there's ever any service work done is unlikely.
Yeah, yeah.
But the gist, the plant selection, the general
Right.
layout, the
So
concept.
there will be cases like that still, but as close as we can get to hard numbers would be really helpful.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask one question relative to the signs and lighting waiver.
Yeah.
Beginning on page 9, but really it goes over to page 10. Also looking for a waiver from light spillover across the southerly lot boundary. Is that actually, I assume that is generated by site lighting and having nothing to do with the signage?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the provision where the lighting appears.
Would you like to put specific language in there to say that it is for that
Yes,
and not for
yes,
the signage? Yeah,
exactly.
I think that that's reasonable.
Yeah. And that was just the property line with Avalon, basically, right? That's the,
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
on that side, right.
Yeah.
or with
With-
the
not
road.
with the mill building.
Yeah.
It's the,
Right, with the mill road that goes
yeah, the
back.
east mill.
Have one.
Please?
Uh,
Yeah.
So number 26 on page 21, it's talking about the certificate of occupancy. And, it says, that the certificate of occupancy issued by the building inspector, but then it waives that to allow occupancy permit to be based on compliance with the comprehensive permit and Mass State Building Code. So it sounds like it's waiving the certificate of occupancy being issued by the building inspector. Now, I saw in the conditions, there's a reference to the building commissioner issuing the certificate of compliance. So I just want to make sure this,
I know it sounds like that, but that is not actually
because
That
it
was
matters.
what the ultimate language will be, because, and again, we will wordsmith this a little bit.
Okay.
But the proposed language is, there's still gonna be an occupancy permit, but it's issued upon compliance with this comprehensive permit, not necessarily with your zoning bylaw strictly, but with this comprehensive permit and the state building code. So that's still going to come from the building inspector.
Yeah, I just, in the other paragraph, how it refers to the building inspector, and then
Yeah. So I guess the
in
question
the
is, what is
waiver,
the
it
point
waives
of
it.
this?
So I wasn't sure if it was waiving the building inspector issue.
Honestly, in response to the chair's question, I don't think it is a necessary requirement. I understand that, the bylaw requires the building inspector shouldn't issue an occupancy permit unless both the requirements of the building code plus the zoning bylaw have been met. This then waives the provisions of your certain provisions of your zoning bylaw. It's still going to be the document that guides the building inspector. I don't think this waiver is necessary, but I do understand that some applicants are over-inclusive rather than under-inclusive when it comes to waivers. But it would still be, and we can add language in to make it clear, an occupancy permit is still being issued by the building inspector. It's just that,
I think the conditions kind of spoke to that, but I thought
Yes,
this sounded
yes.
different, so I
right,
just,
Can I jump in? So I think this is a little bit like the earth moving thing that we talked about earlier, right? So if we approve these waivers, we are overriding our local zoning to allow a building permit to be issued. This is saying that that instead of following local zoning, we're going to follow the comprehensive permit in Mass state law, which to me are functionally meant to be the same thing.
Yeah, and I guess how I'd phrase it is that a CO would issue in compliance with the zoning bylaw as modified by the waivers, and that would be granted by the board if the board is granting them. So, another way to say it, but
Yeah,
the intent is there.
it wasn't my,
CO issue.
it wasn't that wasn't even my question. My question was that it's the building inspector who
Yeah.
issues it,
yes, yes.
okay. Yeah,
rather than this board here or someone else, yeah.
and I guess the flip side of it is, if we approve this waiver, does that create any unintended material changes to what gets built or how it gets built?
Not at all,
Okay, so the worst case scenario is it's dead language that doesn't do anything.
right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not, creating something weird that's good. Not that I think Mr. Smolak is trying to accomplish anything sneaky here. It's more just like, are we creating something weird that's going to have an unintended consequence? And the
Right.
answer seems to be, you don't think so.
No.
Okay. You had some more?
Yeah. Just number 31, it talks about the plan size, the size of the plans that need to be submitted to the town, and you waive that and list some other ones, but it doesn't say anything about submitting them electronically, although in the conditions, I see that it does as well, so just, I wasn't sure, what takes precedence, the waivers or the conditions?
They're actually read in conjunction with each other. So the waivers are supposed to identify specific provisions of, in this case, regulations, versus the decision is not necessarily related to a specific local requirement that you have. So the language in the decision requires digital formats for the plans. We should talk a little bit more about that because maybe the town has very specific types of digital requirements. Or, yes, you want a digital requirement, but you still want so many hard copies, and who are those hard copies to go to? That's whatever your preference is. But this is actually,
I thought language in the condition was okay, although maybe you say electronic format in a format approved by the town or
right,
something like that.
that would work
The
too.
way that the wording reads here is like, the waiver is like very specific to the things in our bylaw that are being waived, but the condition is like a more full picture of what will actually happen, or what we're actually asking to happen.
It's just this waiver says, specifically what will be submitted, it doesn't say electronic.
Right, but the bylaw itself that it's waiving doesn't mention electronic submissions either, so
Right.
that's why the waiver
No,
doesn't
but I
mention
mean,
it.
right, but, the waiver goes on to tell you how it will be done, how it will be
Right,
submitted.
but what's being done instead of what's on here.
Right.
Right, but it does not, again, cover the electronic side of it. But I think this dates back to an era where what all you had was the physical copy, right? And,
Right.
pre-electronic copies of this. And so you wanted to make sure the building inspector had a copy of it that was full detail with all of the features so that he or she could read every piece of it. I think as long as the digital copy is there, I think that kind of covers some of that intention.
Although, is it worth reaching out to the folks in town to say who would like an electronic copy, and we can, it sounds like, write it in?
Yes.
You know, if the fire department would like an electronic copy of plans,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean,
Once the town gets it, can distribute the
Right,
electronic
and-
copy.
yeah.
if they
Sure.
want.
Yeah.
But I will, we're going to bring up Mr. Shapiro a little bit later, and I think that's a reasonable
Answer
question
those
for Mr.
questions.
Shapiro of, is there a format, resolution kind of question, specific that we want to insert about how that document should be best stored and distributed? So we'll bring up Mr. Shapiro a little bit later to ask.
That stuff keeps changing though, so, and we don't know when he's gonna submit it, so I would sort of put it as agreed upon by the town at the time of submission. So when it's time to submit it, you ask the building department what format,
Yeah, I think.
all your consultants can submit it in any they have every
Yeah.
format.
Well, this waiver is really intended to cover us when we filed, because your local ZBA rules are terribly outdated and they reference the old regulations. And so this was really intended to sort of clarify what we were expected to submit. And so we had the discussion, and this is what we were told to submit. So, I mean, it's kind of unusual to ask for waivers from the local comprehensive permit rules, but what we're just trying to do is make sure that what we filed was considered
Right.
compliant, that's all.
And I think what we're just trying to make
Yeah.
sure is that there is a copy that the town gets of the plans that are sufficiently detailed, right? Because I think, to me, what I look at when I see this is you're scaling down a physical print copy, and that means that information can be lost, right? But as long as the digital copy has all that information, and it is submitted, and it is stored in a form that the town can use, I'm okay with that. Do you have any others?
Yeah, the last one, number 33, about paving, or excavation in the street. I think this may also be touched upon in the conditions, so maybe I guess I don't have to bring this one up.
But again, I think what I will do following this meeting is make sure that whatever you ultimately decide in the decision is also going to be consistent with the waivers. This last waiver really has to do with Prescott Street and what the town is planning to do, and how that's going to be coordinated with, the work that this project is also going to require.
But also on High Street, they're gonna be excavating across High Street, and,
And they're
I don't know when High Street was last paved.
I'm not sure Prescott is gonna be touched, right? Is it
Well, the
just-
sidewalks will though, right?
The town, but-
The town will be doing that at
Right.
a later date.
well, we don't know when, and we
At a
don't know
later-
when they're gonna do it.
No, I know.
They
Oh.
may or may not start right away, who knows?
Yeah, or there might be continuing construction after 2028 if the town stays on track for that.
We're just trying to, I mean, I think it's set up in the draft conditions in the decision that basically we're trying to accommodate the town, and we'll try our best to stay out of the right of way once it's paved. But if it's paved and the project starts after the fact, then our intention is to restore to the same or better condition.
Right.
And so that's the only intent. I mean, this is it's a moratorium policy, but I mean, even the Mass DOT, doesn't hold to it all the time either, so, on state highways, so, the intent is to make sure that the streets are, in good condition, especially once Prescott is paved, repaved.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking
So-
of High Street sometimes.
And High Street too, yeah.
If it's recently paved, if you trench across it, you don't just patch the trench, you
Yeah.
go out some certain distance on either side, cold plane it down and blend it in, so
It's traffic calming.
yeah.
No, I think-
The speed bump, you mean?
Yeah. Well, I think Mr. Steinberg has worked with the town enough to make sure that, it's in his interest too, to make sure that the street, especially in front of the businesses, is in good shape.
Yeah, because this is right by the entrance to this exact building. Kind of rough to leave it,
Yeah, but there's lots of
you're right,
poorly patched trenches across roads in town, so
yeah,
if we can avoid that, I'd rather avoid it.
yeah.
Mr. Testa, Ms. Craig Coleman, any additional questions on the waivers?
I think so. I think I'd want to spend some time on the
Yeah,
conditions.
we're definitely gonna, I want to make sure we have enough time for that. But Ms. Rutherford, any questions on your end before we move on to the conditions?
The ones I had have been answered. Thank you so much.
Although,
Okay.
actually, this is a point of order question, not, I guess, for the list of waivers, but we've already established that we're kind of looking for some more detail on this, so does that mean we cannot close public comment tonight? Regardless.
So if we feel we need more discussion with the applicant, then we don't close. But if we feel that we have accomplished everything we're going to accomplish in a meeting, and that all we just need is the text, and we believe that that text is good enough that we can deliberate on it, then we can close.
Okay.
But it is our choice as a board. We'll
Is there a
get to that
material
point.
difference between closing public comment at the end of this meeting versus the beginning of next meeting?
Not necessarily. It is our discretion to do so. We have a continuance until July 15th for the public meeting, and we would be under some pressure to close it then, unless we get a further continuance.
Yeah. Okay,
But,
yeah, and we can talk more about that later.
yeah,
I just was
so-
wondering if we had just already basically voted on that by deciding that we're gonna move on, but ask for more
No.
detail, basically.
Yeah, we haven't necessarily, but we could discuss how we want to approach it, because the question would be, do we want to bring the applicant back up to talk more about it at the next meeting?
Yeah. And
That's that to me is the threshold.
But
sounds
they
good.
can submit things to us after we close it? Is that?
No.
No? Okay, so then,
If we want a resubmission.
yeah, so then we probably do want to keep it open. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, could I ask, before we move on to the decision, could I ask one clarification question on the waivers? Looking at pages 12, 14, and 15, and I know this gets into all the dimensional requirements across the 3 zoning subdistricts, but on page 12, for example, for a minimum setback, you have a proposal of 17.5 feet relative to the R4 district. But then if we go to page 14, appears we have a front setback of 19.9 feet. And then on page 15, front setback, we're back to 17.5 feet. Is that correct? Or is one of those numbers wrong?
So the district, actually the R4 and the IS runs through the almost the center of the parcel. And I guess the northern half of the parcel includes one wing of the building, which is 17.5 along Prescott. And then there's the separate wing on the western side, that's 19 feet. So that's
the
correct, yeah.
discrepancy, okay.
Yeah,
So they're physically 2 different buildings.
Right.
And 2 different
well,
setbacks.
2 different setbacks because of the different zones.
Yeah, gotcha.
Thank you.
Is that the same for the rear setback that's crossed out and changed, or is that just a correction from when we changed the design of the building?
Well, you ask a loaded question. I mean, the sub-district A district, when it abuts a district that's located, that's a residential district that's located outside of the sub-district A, then you have to respect a 35-foot setback around that perimeter. But where that stops, sub-district A, when it isn't abutting a district that's a residential in nature, that front setback is 0. And then it has side setbacks, and the rear setback doesn't apply in that circumstance because the rear of the lot is really along the condominiums to the back, and that already has a 35-foot setback. So, not to get into the weeds, but that's the reason why there's a difference there. But
Okay.
All right. So a few things that I would like to start off with that I think are relatively straightforward with
Sorry,
regards
just
to the.
really quick.
Okay.
I just want to make sure, just because like on 14, the rear setback it was 29.2 and then crossed out and now it's 36.6. That was from the change of the design of the building, I am assuming. But then on 15, it says the rear setback is still 29.2. So is that the same sort of like different splits of the lot situation, or is 15 not updated correctly the way 14 is?
It's the split zone.
It's a split zone.
Yeah.
It's the split
So
zone.
perhaps some clarity with all the dimensional setbacks. So I think you were asking for like a visual, and that visual exists on the site plan. There's a zoning table, and perhaps that zoning table could also be snapshotted into the waivers to provide some clarity. But in essence, this text that you see is a reflection of the zoning table in its columnar form, where the 3 zones existing and proposed. So, but to answer your question, the 2 front and rear yard setback, proposed setback, is because of the R4 and the IS.
Okay. It was more like the question was changed. So like you pointed out that like there was an inconsistency between the different waivers in the front, and then there's a similar inconsistency in the rear.
Yeah, that rear was, because there was a difference in where that was measured, because the rear setback for the IS was measured in a different place. to
Yeah,
be
I
conformed.
think the building
Building
was
didn't change.
was nipped and tucked
Right.
2 iterations ago, right? Which changed the Prescott and
Yeah,
and the-
that's what.
and
just-
39
Right,
Prescott.
and that's, yeah, and
But-
that's where it changed it from 29.2 to
Yeah, so
36.6.
I think this latest iteration, we tried to provide the most restrictive setbacks proposed in each zone to be comprehensive. So I think that's
I'm just trying
why-
to make sure that like on page 14, we're addressing the setback, the new setback after the change in the orientation of the building that I think was a big piece of progress. And then that we're not like then going back and allowing the same thing again in 15 by having a rear setback of 29.2. Like, it's not just that number wasn't updated, it's a physically different spot. Do you know what I'm saying? So, unfortunately, they're on different pages, but I think it's in the red line version. Yeah, so like, right, rear setback required 30 feet, and this is 29.2. The previous page shows rear setback, 29.2 crossed out is now 36.6. That was the change in the building design that moved that from 29.2 to 36.6, correct?
No, I mean, are those because of the different zones?
Well, that's what I'm trying to establish.
Yeah, so I mean,
The proposed is the actual measurement, it doesn't matter which zone it's in, right?
well, it does.
Well, it
It
does because the
we.
zones
Some
are
of the
different
setbacks
parts
are
of
in
the-
one
So-
zone, some setbacks are in
I mean,
another
do-
zone.
Yeah.
Do you
but
wanna-
the number that's there is the actual measurement, it's.
But it's the actual
Then under the
measurement
waiver-
in that zone.
What?
It's the actual measurement in the zone.
The setback
The
in.
measurement for the
specified.
setback doesn't matter what zone it's in.
No, it
It's
does.
from the property
It
line.
does.
Because the lot is split.
Yeah, so
There's different.
One setback's in one zone, another setback's in another zone.
So if you split,
The part
This
of the
whole-
building that's in one zone has one setback. The part of the building that's in another zone has a different setback.
if you split this whole
Yeah,
room
so
in
can
half
I-
this way.
can I make a suggestion? Could we pull up the site plan and I could point to where all these setbacks are? We could see them and touch them.
That'd be,
Sounds good.
that would be sheet 4.
So on the civil plan,
Visually, it'll be a lot easier to comprehend. I know there's a lot here.
Yeah, I just want to differentiate between a clerical thing that it's whatever and making sure that we're actually agreeing to what we think we're agreeing to.
And again, once we revise the waivers, we'll take out the ones we comply with and then just identify more
sheet
clearly
4,
the
Terry.
setbacks.
Yeah.
okay, so Terry's probably gonna keep it zoomed out, which is fine, but just that zoning table is here. So that zoning table is a columnar reflection of what the text in the waiver says, and is also the highlights of what is shown on the plan. So for instance, if you could stay in this zoning, so this this area, so this zone, you see this gray dashed line? Plan north of that is the R4, and plan south is the IS zone, okay? And so plan north, this bump out in this building here is 17 and a half feet from this front property line. So that's the 17 and a half feet referenced right there. And then conversely, if you can just scroll down just a little bit, Terry, in the IS zone, yep, right there, this setback here is 19.9, and that's the 19.9.
I figured out what was throwing me off. The front is the left side of the building.
Oh, okay.
And the back
So the
is
rear
the
is
right
the
side
right.
of the building. Yeah, so like that rear difference is split by that zoning on the
Yeah,
same,
so
on
the
other
same
side.
thing back here. There is one zone, one setback here in the in the R4, and then this wing is in the IS. That's the 36.6.
So was that side also shifted in the redesign?
Was there some nipping and
Like, why
tucking
was
in
it changed?
Terry, can you move over?
there? I think there was some
The
nipping and
north
tucking
wing,
here.
The angle of that wing was pulled down to widen the
Thank you,
buffer
Terry.
to the north, yeah.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
okay.
so the critical setback in the R4 zone is this dimension here, and then conversely in the IS zone,
Took out that corner.
it's right there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
This was
Yeah,
flush
it was
there,
it was
right?
more.
Okay. But it's the 36.6 one that was edited in the waivers list.
Because I think we graduated to provide proposed setbacks in each zone
Gotcha.
to be comprehensive.
Okay.
So the
right.
36.6 is not the most restrictive setback on the property. It's just
Right.
good because the 29.2 is.
Just in that zone.
It's
Gotcha.
just, and the 36.6 doesn't require a waiver. We're just showing it.
Awesome. Thank you. Much better.
All right.
Conditions?
Yeah, let's talk about conditions. All right, there's a few things that we can address.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There are a few things that we can address reasonably quickly. One is, Ms. Murray, you have a partial list here of letters and comments from abutters. I think I would rather not do. I don't love the idea of just putting everything into a bin because that time treats them as the same, but I also don't want to create a ton of work by making you list out each one. And so what I would like to propose is some kind of language saying that it's available on the 40B website, because we will keep those comments available there. And Terry, maybe you can work with Ms. Murray to figure out a way to include like a link or some kind of text as a way to direct people to that. Because I want to make sure that all the comments remain as part of the public record in a way that's accessible, even just from reading our decision document. But I also, like I said, I don't want to make it a thing where, you know, every time we get one more comment, we have to then adjust this document.
Okay.
Let's see. There was a discussion about local preference. So we talked local preference earlier. We also talked veterans preference. I am open to the point of view of the board. I'd like to hear thoughts of what people would like to do. This is item number 16 on our list, on the decision. Page 18 on the commented one. It's, you know, right now the way that we've written it includes that local preference. Do people want to have that? And also includes a veterans preference.
Yeah, I think we maxed them both out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I read that. I thought I was okay with it.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because that is entirely at our discretion, right? We can include it or not, and the applicant has indicated that they don't have a strong preference either way based on what we want to do. So I just want to make, again, I'm trying to get through the stuff that's going to be straightforward for us first, and then we can get into some of the meatier things. Let's see. I'm trying to think, are there any other obvious administrative ones? Ms. Murray, do you have anything that you are thinking of that are sort of straight up and down decisions for the board to make? That are... simple here. I think that might cover all of them. Let's see. Let's see. EV parking spaces. No, I don't think that's. So pathway improvement, tree preservation plan.
Because anything that was highlighted needed some finalization,
It was to draw some attention to it, that maybe we should discuss it. Like, this is not a particularly critical one, but on page 17, number 14.
Yeah.
Typically, we include language that says the applicant's going to notify the planning director when building permits are issued for purposes of being able to add these units to the SHI. Had a little back and forth with the applicant's counsel about this. I'm not quite sure what your internal process is in terms of when a building permit is issued, is the planning director notified of that? Maybe electronically, that sort of notice does occur? Or do we need to put that obligation, if you will, on the applicant?
We have the planning director here. Mr. Shapiro, would you like to come up and just quickly give us a thought there, if you have a strong opinion?
Ms. Murray, do you mind repeating
No,
what
no,
the issue
that's
is here?
fine. So it's condition number 14, where we're asking the applicant to notify the planning director when building permits issued, because we're assuming that it is the building department that will submit these units for inclusion on the SHI. The developer sort of pushed back saying, well, do we really need to notify the planning department versus isn't that something that is just done internally? And I know a lot of towns are using, like online permitting that does notify everyone.
So I would say that once building permits are filed for, they will be done online through an online permitting system, and the planning department will essentially be notified
Automatically.
by default, because they are included on the list of staffers that are notified when building
So you
permits are
don't
filed for.
need any explicit cutout
I don't
to be
think so.
notified.
Okay,
Based on what I'm hearing.
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
All right, so,
15 is the one that's about the electronic submission, or is that?
yes.
Mr. Chair?
Or, no, I think
oh,
I'm
no, no,
looking at a
that's-
different place.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Why is 15 highlighted? Just below the one we were just talking about.
So again, typically, the language I insert is that the applicant has to provide a copy of the signed regulatory agreement prior to the issuance of building permit. Because that's our way of locking in that we're going to get 25% of these units as affordable. The applicant added in some language that because of closing on the financing, that sometimes they need a building permit to have been issued in order to close on all of those documents. So the language was added that we're not going to issue the building permit until the regulatory agreement is provided to us, but the building permit will be held in escrow, basically held by the building inspector until such time as the closing has occurred.
Gotcha.
I don't really have an issue with the changes that the applicant has proposed, except that our building commissioner is not usually someone who is privy to knowing when all of those closings occur.
Right.
But for our purposes, we just really want the regulatory agreement signed and recorded.
If I may add, what's happened in circumstances where we've been involved in some financing of similar projects is that sometimes a lender will want to see evidence that a building permit is going to be issued subject to the receipt of the payment of building permit fees. So in other words, have you met all your preconditions to the issuance of the building permit so that we, the lender, feel comfortable closing? And so in that circumstance, what we've typically done is had a discussion with the building commissioner in advance to discuss that if they're willing to issue sort of a will-serve letter, for lack of a better term,
promissory notice.
that a building permit's going to be issued once we get the receipt of fees. So that it gives the comfort that a building permit has no other conditions other than the payment of fees. So that's the other circumstance we run into that.
Okay. All right, number 17 is the parking.
Number
And,
17 on which page?
page 11. So,
Multiple 17.
yeah, so number 17 is the parking. I think, given the content of our discussion earlier, we've decided to not attach a number stipulation to the sharing of parking units. And so I think that sort of settles the language of that section. Ms. Murray, is there anything else in terms of 17 and 18, because 18 is also talks a bit about the parking, that needs further adjustment or change?
No, I think it really came down to whether or not you were going to try to put in a hard and fast number there, so I think the condition will work.
Okay. Yeah, and then number 28, I think you've highlighted in there, the is not consistent with local needs. That is basically are we approving this or are we not?
Exactly. Mhm.
Okay.
So again, Mike, there's multiple number 28 or number 17s. Can you just give this
Oh,
page number as
Sorry,
well
sorry.
as the
Yep,
numbers?
Sorry. So I was talking about number 17 on page 11.
Right, and then number 28 on page 13.
Sorry.
28 is
Yes,
page 13.
number 28 on page 13.
Okay,
Yep, I'm sorry. I will try to be more specific there.
that's
Yes.
okay.
All right, and then, so conditions of approval, we've got, date needs to be added, obviously. All right, site development plan. So this is that same
a
language,
line-
to the extent not listed in Exhibit B, the board grants those waivers as are apparent on the site development plans.
Right, if you choose to keep that language in, exactly.
There's a line in number 26 on page 13 that says project support was also voiced by the neighborhood. I don't recall that. Am I misremembering? it?
Sorry, where is this?
In number 26 on page 13, project support was also voiced by the neighborhood. It's like right in the middle of that
That was,
paragraph,
I
basically.
think Mr. Sudari had appeared. I thought he had appeared and spoken favor.
I don't, oh.
It's the second
Yeah,
sentence. in
I
that.
don't know if that was actually true. I'm not sure anyone from the neighborhood
Yeah,
did
I don't
voice support for it.
recall that. I also don't know how much it matters, but I just think it caught my eye when I was reading through it. And I was like, I don't recall that.
I think we had one vote of support from someone who was
Not in the
a
neighborhood.
commercial tenant, but not for, but yeah, not anyone who is a resident of the local area.
I think he was in the neighborhood too. He lived in the neighborhood, so.
Oh,
But it really is not a big deal.
it's not an actionable clause of any sort.
All right, we've got comprehensive permit shall expire 3 years. You've highlighted that. Is there any reason for discussion
Just
there?
to let you know, I get a lot of questions from folks about that, that's
Okay.
all.
Okay. Not that that's an option for us, I'm
No, not
guessing.
really.
Okay. All right, we talked about on page 18, number 16, that's the local preference and the veterans preference. Is there any other information that you need for those items?
No, I would just, if the board, just reading through some of the highlighted text, this came up in another 40B that I did with Attorney Smolak's colleague, that sometimes the subsidizing agency, in order to approve veterans housing, sometimes they require on-site veteran services, which obviously the applicant is not providing. So we've added some language that would say that if that is the case, they are to see whether or not the town's veteran support services could be used as a substitute for on-site services. If that's not acceptable to the subsidizing agency, then it becomes impossible or impractical for the applicant to provide the veterans housing on-site, in which case we would agree that
They can strike that.
they can just strike that provision, exactly.
Mr. Killalay, are you okay with that?
Well, it's beyond their control. It just sort of thinks at a minute, it's a bureaucratic thing that's gonna deny veterans the
Access.
possibility for,
Essentially,
you know, they
Yeah.
could have, it, but then it said, because you don't have services, none of our people
It's a
will have.
question for incredibly efficient elected officials, I'm sure.
Yes, it is, yeah. On page 19, Mr. Chair, we've had some discussion already tonight about the format of plans.
Yeah.
And, condition number 19 there on page 19. This could easily be condensed to, as Mr. Killalea was suggesting earlier, that the format shall be in a form that is, acceptable, say, to the building commissioner, unless you do have some sort of specific requirements for size of hard copies and digital format.
Mr. Smolak, are you okay with that kind of condition?
Yeah, we're fine with that. It's
that-
it's a matter of, there'll be communication before we file anyway,
Yeah.
so.
I mean,
I think that's what it says in number 20 there anyways.
the only reason to do it otherwise, right, is if for some reason you felt that the building commissioner was going to ask for something unreasonable, but I don't think that he
We
will.
have no reason to believe that.
Okay.
Is there any point of double checking with Mr. Shapiro, or is that?
Everything's electronic.
Mr. Shapiro, do you want to come up and do you have any input on that? So this is asking whether or not
Format
there's any particular set of formatting rules that need to be inserted in here in terms of the way the document is submitted.
Yeah, I wouldn't have the information at my ready tonight to answer that, but I can certainly check in with the building commissioner to see if there's any specific, but I don't
I
have.
think I'm
It
fine.
says in a format acceptable to the town.
Right, I was gonna say, I think if you're willing to defer to the building commissioner, then I
yes.
think we are in this document as well, and I
Yes.
think that that's okay. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything else that
We're missing.
we're missing.
Thank you.
And that also goes with number 21 on page 20, that this as-built must be provided in paper as well as in SDF format to the planning department, and that, I guess, as determined by the building commissioner.
Right, okay.
All right, now we get to
So meet and greet us.
construction. Yes. All right, so tell us, so what is the highlighting on number 26 on page 21 here?
Really just to draw your attention to it, not necessarily that there's any issue or action required, but just to let everybody know that, this would be where the pre-construction meeting takes place. If you had any requirement, for example, that the pre-construction meeting has to take place 21 days prior to the start of construction as opposed to 14 days, or you look at the list of departments to be included with a pre-construction meeting. Is there anybody that we've left out that you'd like to add? Anything like that, really.
Would the health department come into play there, or is that not usually part of that?
The health department would come in if you had septic systems and/or wells, which we don't necessarily have here,
But not like potential asbestos if it's found or anything
we
like
could
that?
certainly include the health department because we do have a demolition of the garage, so.
Right. Or at least maybe with like.
That is mentioned there, though. Somewhere else that's mentioned
Yes.
about the asbestos
Right, but she
stuff.
specifically asked about like which departments to be included in this part, and I just didn't see the health department enlisted in there. So I don't know if that's just worth adding in. It does, I do remember it saying it in another place.
But
So
asbestos
it
is
might
all
be
done
redundant.
through the DEP notification versus the health department.
Right.
And you have to do it in order to get your demolition permit, so it's just part of the Mass Code.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and then,
But number 28, which isn't highlighted, sorry.
no, please.
You talk about soil testing, but you test soil for geotechnical purposes and also for environmental. It doesn't specify. I think from reading it, you mean environmental purposes.
Environmental purposes,
Yeah, but it also says if necessary. So what would determine it necessary? They do a 21E and it says we need further testing, or you,
We were considering this a geotech question. I think this was related to stormwater and so on, to the extent there was any additional soil testing or confirmatory testing that might be required. Any lender's going to require us to provide some sort of environmental investigation anyway, pre-construction, so I don't think it's necessary, and it's a state that's a state law issue as opposed to a comp permit issue.
If it's for geotechnical purposes,
For
I don't
geotech,
really
it's
care,
different.
that's between you and your engineers, you know,
Yeah.
and the building commissioner, deciding what kind of foundation you're gonna have. But if it's for environmental purposes, that has more of an impact on the
Yeah.
neighborhood. So that's why I would want it in here.
Then this line about residential lot shall be treated in accordance with industry standards, treated is to change the structure for reinforcement for, like if the soil testing is about stability or water flow, then what is the treatment? Is that just any soil amendment or change?
Well, first.
I guess I read that as like
It depends if
treating
this is
an
for,
issue.
first you have, is this for environmental purposes or geotechnical purposes?
Right, I think it was the word treated that made me think it was for environmental purposes. But it sounds
Well,
like it's not that.
You can treat both conditions. If it's geotechnical, you treat it with
Our
bios or
intent was,
watering or something like that too, so.
our intent was for geotech purposes because environmental is governed by state law anyway. So, and we have to comply with state law,
Right.
whatever is required.
Do we need any, the subject was brought up about asbestos before. Do we need any special cutout for that, or is that also going to be covered by state law?
It's technically all covered by state law or state regulations, but, and I respect that Attorney Smolak is saying this was for geotechnical purposes. That was not my intent behind it, was thinking about the asbestos potentially in the garage, and then also what might be related to the foundation as you start excavating. Attorney Smolak's correct. They have to comply with state law. There's nothing that we do here that waives that in any way, shape, or form. I have had some zoning boards in the past that want that extra layer of protection.
I mean, I think we have granted Mr. Smolak some cases of extra protection in other spots, and so I feel like maybe he can grant us this one, and that.
I think some
we
of
can add
others
it in.
have brought that up too, as
Yeah.
far as safety and
Right.
that sort
Yeah.
of thing, so.
Because I think I would like, especially with this, because of that, with regards to asbestos, it to be
Well, this wouldn't
explicitly
be
laid out.
asbestos because this is soil testing.
Well, but Ms. Murray
That
felt
is-
that that
there's
was
some- there's
part of
somewhat-
this, and so maybe we can
Right.
make it more specific.
Okay.
to
Well, I think you
those.
have a separate paragraph somewhere where you mentioned the asbestos.
We do with respect to the demolition of the garage.
Right.
But there's also, the garage is obviously attached to and, embedded in the ground and the soil. So
Oh,
is
but
there
you
a
don't get
potential?
asbestos in soil. I mean, you're looking for oil or PCBs or that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that is a question, is like, is there a state law that involves soil testing in areas where cars were previously parked? I know, like, if this were a gas station, obviously, this would be like, they would have all sorts of soil testing that would be required, but this is just a parking area. Is that covered in state law?
Well,
I
it's
don't
not
know.
I've done this a lot of times, but I am not an expert. It's usually covered by, usually you have a due diligence and an environmental report on a 21E, and that tells you whether you should do more testing or not, but it's not necessarily required to submit that to the state unless you only have to submit it to the state if you're gonna be disturbing that or digging it up.
Or if you have a reportable
Or
release.
level.
A reportable
Yeah.
release, yeah.
So
but-
every lender is
So
going
the
to
lenders,
require,
so the lenders require it,
is
but
going to
the
require an
state might never
environmental
see
review
it.
anyway, and so, I mean, that's usually governed outside of a transaction like this. I mean, basically, that's customary to do environmental investigation
So
before you
that's like,
start.
in order to obtain financing, you'd have
Yeah,
to
oh,
show
yeah,
that you weren't
absolutely.
giving them a polluted site, essentially.
You're going to have to choose the licensed site professional that the lender wants you
Right.
to use, so.
Yeah.
That's out of our control, really.
And then they would either not grant financing or request mitigation, probably. This is part of the process I'm not familiar with and I'm curious about, but
Yeah,
we don't have
you
to get into
have
it.
budgeted. Sometimes you insure against it, a bunch of ways to approach it, that's up to them.
And in terms of asbestos, I mean, there are very extensive federal, state, and local requirements for asbestos preparation, abatement, and removal that you are required to follow to the letter, and with the contractors who are experienced with asbestos removal and watched very closely by the Attorney General's office. So, that's always done to the letter, or it should be. Responsible people do it to the letter, so.
So item 29 across pages 21, 22.
So,
Oh, and
so 28 still isn't clear what you're gonna
What-
say
what we-
about that.
What we could do here instead is, like I said, this is some language from another community that really had an issue that they knew was already contaminated to begin with. We could add some language, and I can work with Attorney Smolak on this to basically, perhaps as part of their due diligence in securing their financing, that if anything is detected, that is a.
Because sometimes it's also detected once you start digging. You, like, the
But
initial
again,
testing doesn't
it's going to
identify it.
depend on
but-
what is it, and is it of a certain threshold,
Exactly.
you know, that it becomes a reportable release, whatever. So they're going to have to comply with and notify the state of any of those issues. Do you also want the ZBA to be notified?
I think the Board of Health is notified anyway as well.
They
It's about a
typically
previous
are, yes,
notification.
but, you know,
I mean, what do we do with it at that point?
right, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I care, but I want the proper procedures followed if it's, and I guess we were just trying to reiterate it in here because some of the abutters had voiced
Right.
concern about that.
right.
So that's-
That's why it's here. So we could rework this, like I said, you know, if anything is discovered as part of any of the environmental testing that is required for purposes of securing financing, that, you know, the applicant is required to follow all federal and state regulations with respect to abatement, remediation, disposal, whatever. I mean, it's really just reiterating what they're already obligated to do, but
Yeah.
I understand that a board sometimes likes that extra level of knowing it was
Reassurance.
addressed, yes.
Yeah. Mr. Smolak, are you okay with us adding that in? I know it feels redundant, but we would like to have it in there
Well,
anyways.
he had some redundancy in his
That-
waivers.
Right, I feel like it goes both ways here. Right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, I mean, there are a lot of conditions in here. You're about, I'd say, about 12 or 14 conditions short of what was required for conditions in the Amazon building for 100 acres and 3.8 million square feet of building. So you're protected.
It didn't have well, I guess there is a house across the street, I guess, but
It was also, you could
didn't have
argue,
a whole
simpler
name.
from a zoning perspective.
didn't have a neighborhood across the street from it.
But, all right, let's look at number 29. So you've got a number of items across pages 21 and 22 and a little into 23 highlighted here. Is there any particular action items, or are these just calling our
Again,
attention?
not necessarily an action item, except with respect to 29B.
Okay,
Typically, you know, you get the final, let's call it the construction level plans.
yeah.
That, does the board want to review them? Does the board want the building commissioner to review? Do you want your peer reviewer? I think at our last meeting, we might have discussed, for consistencies with this decision, just having the board's peer reviewer look at them, but it's whatever you'd like it to be.
So is that for the peer reviewer to then basically assess whether or not the final plans are of substantial change from what's being submitted here?
They should not be a substantial change. They should be in
Right.
conformance with this decision, yes, and
Yeah.
that's the
And
primary
peer reviewer
purpose.
would give us that.
Would give you a review and say, you know what, the building was only supposed to be 17.5 feet off of Prescott, and guess what? It's, you know, 16.5 up. You either correct it, or you come back to this board to address that. So things like that should be noted, yes.
I'm happy for the peer reviewer.
Yeah, I think, I don't think it would be helpful for the board to try to sift through it, so I think the peer
Typically, it
reviewer
is
would be-
not, right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
But, number C of that, on page 22, the construction management plan,
Yes.
I'd like to specify that the construction management plan will address dust control, and also I'm forgetting the term of it, but I know I've had to use them before. There are dust monitors that you put up that measure dust and record it. I just don't remember what they are called, but I've had,
Who would that be reported to?
This is talking about who's, well,
Like presumably, if we're asking the applicant to record this stuff, it gets submitted to somebody so that it is a public document.
Do we really need dust monitoring like that? I mean, there's a standard protocol to monitor dust, and I've never seen a planning board condition and a planning board decision require, you know?
I've had it.
Yeah, no, I
before,
hear you.
Especially with demolition, I mean, you know, you go along, by the time building inspector comes down, you know, there's dust getting all over the neighborhood, but by the time anyone comes down and looks at it, it's settled down. If you have these monitors, they gauge it and say, no, you know,
Yeah.
at 12 o'clock, there was a
Right.
huge cloud of dust that
Yeah.
went and covered all the houses
Yeah.
up Prescott Street.
No, I hear you. I also want to mention that Mr. Steinberg has taken down buildings on the site before and hasn't had any issues whatsoever.
Then you won't have a problem.
Well, I mean, there wasn't a need for any dust monitoring.
I mean,
That's,
this is
Yeah,
much
right.
closer to
dust
resident,
monitors.
But he's right across the street now.
this is much closer to
those
the residential
buildings.
buildings than in previous buildings. I mean, so this may be an extreme example, but I have a cousin who's worked in wilderness areas, and federal law dictated one specific piece of equipment that could be used. That was the only petroleum gas powered thing that's never been rebuilt since the 50s. And it's, so penning in like a specific piece of equipment, I don't know how useful that is, but is there like
Let's
a,
not do that.
yeah, is there like a conceptual thing that you can outline here, Frank, other than saying like they must use this exact monitoring system that,
No,
Exists.
I don't remember what it was, but it's an industry thing. I mean, I've dealt with it a number of times, especially in Boston. It's the, you know,
yeah, I guess, Frank, we're trying to like narrow down what the verbiage should be. So it sounds like you're asking for like a nebulous piece of equipment that we are not familiar with. So how can we get this to a place that you're asking for with the information that we have?
Would it be satisfactory, you know, we don't detail everything
Right.
that the construction management plan shall include. I did
I put
include
dust
the,
monitoring sensors.
okay,
Dust is addressed in the form of notes on the plan, and it says dust shall be controlled in accordance with local and state standards. We've never been questioned on anything more than that. The issue with providing like air quality sensors is what you may be referring to, is that
That may
you
be
have to
it.
take a baseline. So I think that gets personally a little bit messy. I think if,
Look, I've done it a couple of times.
yeah, I think
and
if
it's-
proper
it's not-
protocol is during the demolition phase, there's proper watering if necessary. It all depends on what day. If it's raining outside, as opposed to 90-degree sunny and windy. So
Or how about if we let the...
Those protocols are, lots of times, you get dust clouds that are blown all over the place. I've seen this lots of times. I spent a lot of time on construction sites.
I've also done regrading, and I know how dusty it can get, especially
Yeah.
when it's hot and dry.
And lots of times, you might have a water truck out there, and you have an operator for it. They come by
Right,
when
but
they
Frank,
need
how
to.
do we make this verbiage
Legible.
talk about what you're talking about, you know?
Well, the air quality monitor, thank you for reminding me of the term for those. But
Can I
those
make,
will-
I'm sorry, can I make a suggestion that perhaps the board has the opportunity to comment on the CMP? And if you don't like what you see, let the building commissioner know. I mean, as an alternative. I mean, we're talking hypothetical here right now until you see our construction management plan, which is really done by the general contractor, right? And at the time, before you're pulling a building permit, and then all the other departments are reviewing it and so on. Just a thought. I'm not dismissing what you're saying, I'm just saying that.
Concern of dust was another issue that had been brought up by the neighbors. Some construction management plans address it to different levels. I would just like to make sure it's specified that is going to be part.
So if we receive a copy of it, and then we don't see enough addressing of dust.
Yeah.
What we
push
could-
back and say it wasn't required. I just wanted to be in here that it is.
What we could do, so like I was saying, we don't necessarily list everything that the construction management plan has to include. I specifically included asbestos because we knew about the garage. We could add here that that the construction management plan shall also include dust control measures, like erosion control measures. And then if that comes back to the board for review and approval, that does give you an opportunity at that point to say, do you think the applicant has done everything that's necessary? Rather than, specifying that air quality monitors and monitoring must be in place sort of preemptively, as opposed to seeing what their whole plan might be. Is that only necessary, for example, during the demolition of the garage when we suspect that asbestos may become airborne?
I mean,
Well, it's not for there's plenty of
No, I
regulations
understand, but I'm
for
just saying you
asbestos.
could limit it, or it could be, for the entire construction phase. But one thing that we do need to be mindful of is when we impose conditions as part of a comprehensive permit, we're required to make sure that we don't impose conditions on this type of project that you wouldn't impose on other projects in town. So I heard Attorney Smolak mention, an Amazon facility. I realize we've got commercial versus residential, and maybe the location, proximity to abutters might be different, but that is just something to bear in mind if we're going to impose a condition that traditionally
Well,
this
I've
town
seen
has
tho-
never imposed.
I've seen those types of conditions
Yeah.
imposed a number of times,
In North
not necessarily
Right,
in
but-
North Andover.
Yeah,
Right.
and they're
In
not
Boston.
common, right? But I would go one step further. I don't have experience with construction on my own personal end, but I'm a chemist and I've done a lot of stuff involving environmental health and safety, right? And so I've done experiments with air quality monitors, on people in physical places. My experience with them is that they are quite a noisy data set. That because there's heterogeneity in terms of the way things are, the data is noisy, right? That it is a noisy method of data acquisition, which is not necessarily to say that you can't use it, but more to say that I think it gets us into really messy territory if we start specifying the method of data acquisition.
Maybe this would
Right.
help with Frank is what teeth do we have if we say that the zoning board gets to review the construction management's schedule and our plan and we don't feel like there's enough protection? Is there, do we just submit that we don't feel like there's enough protection and they kind of say, well,
Well, I don't
We're
think
good?
it's just enough to say it shall be reviewed by the board, because to your point, if you're not happy with it, what
Then what
recourse do you have?
happens?
right.
So I think it would have to say for the board's review and approval. And if you're going to withhold approval, then there has to be a conversation with the applicant about what is missing, what more needs to be done to make you all comfortable with this.
Gotcha. I think that makes more sense to me because they might come back with a construction management plan that is above and beyond anything that we could even have outlined here. I'm just saying, specific technology is not something I'm interested in requesting because I don't know that is appropriate to the situation.
Well, and to Mr. Swank's point, where it's to some degree debating a hypothetical, right? Like, we don't have the details of the construction management plan, and we are trying to specify what the construction management plan is. I think it probably makes more sense to have that in front of us and approve it. To be honest, I'm going to say here, when I look at that construction management plan, I don't think I am going to be that well suited to judge whether that construction plan is sufficient. Right? I will lean on the building commissioner's perspective on that quite heavily. So for me personally, as one vote on this board, I don't feel that is necessarily a useful thing. But if it is important to other members of this board, I will support it.
Would the Board of Health, which is listed here, and obviously would have, some say over things like asbestos, but would the Board of Health weigh in on if they felt like there was not enough dust mitigation? Is that typically part of what their purview would be in this circumstance?
I would assume that it would simply be the building commissioner, right, who would approve the plan, typically?
I've never, I think every town does it a little bit differently in who they invite to review and be part of like the pre-construction meeting or review the construction management plan. Typically, it's your building inspector or your peer review engineer who look at it. But it's also important to police and fire. If you've got truck hauling roads or any road closures, or fire department needs to make sure that they can get onto the site if necessary, if there's a fire during construction. We could certainly add the health department for their expertise.
And I think we talked about adding that in the previous bullet point. But I just don't know if they would even weigh in on things like dust.
They might not.
Yeah, I don't think they would. All right, look, I'm gonna be honest here, we're halfway through this decision. It is after 9 o'clock. I want to be able to get through this because otherwise we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So, are we able to move on?
Sure.
All right.
If you could give a specific verbiage that we could all talk about, I think we would maybe want to continue.
Let it go. Handle it.
All right. Items 30 and 32, I assume these are just to call our attention to them on page 23?
Exactly.
Yep. An item, let's see, the hours here, I assume there's some negotiation between you and Mr. Smolak on the construction hours?
There was, and I think Mr. Smolak added in some hours and dates, days of the week that were consistent with prior planning board decisions.
Okay. Number 37, erosion controls, I assume that's also just calling our attention to it?
Yes.
Okay. Page 25, number 41, landscaping and other improvements, punch list work for the projects are not completed prior to issuance of. So this is basically just demonstrating completeness of the work.
And requiring a surety for anything that is not completed, say, when a construction season comes to an end.
Right.
And it will have to be held over to the next season. It will require surety to be posted.
Number 44 on page 25. Decision shall be include all contracts, subcontracts, and specifications. Is that, again, just calling attention to it? Is there anything else?
Exactly.
Okay.
That was a conservation commission comment, I think.
Um,
Condition.
Yep.
And then number 45 on page 25 is the comment on asbestos.
Right. For the sake of letting folks know for the audience, 46 addresses any security cameras and making sure that they're positioned such that it would not intrude upon the immediate property line of any of the residential abutters.
Okay. 49.
And there's also 50 that has no snow dumping off the property,
Correct, yep.
especially off of the
Off the roof
garage.
deck or onto abutting property, no snow removal, correct?
Number 49, it says, as recommended in the traffic report is further described below. I assume that means that as in the traffic report will be stapled to this and thus referring to
There's
that, or-
actually a traffic section later on.
Okay.
So the traffic management program is outlined there.
Okay.
So one question perhaps for the zoning board is
Sure.
On page 28, number 61.
Yep.
Given that much of the state is experiencing a drought, we didn't really address this, but some communities are now saying that if there's going to be an irrigation system for, the landscaping, that they are in some cases requiring that you use a well as opposed to the municipal water system. Attorney Smolak did make a slight change to that it would just be in accordance with the town's general bylaws. We don't have to address irrigation at all if we don't want to. It's just something for the board to consider.
I mean, I guess is that covered under the agreement that they would like replace any trees that or landscaping that didn't make it within it?
No, I consider this to be more for, generally they're watering the grass to keep it nice and green.
I mean,
I would, on wells, I would even check, I'm not sure you're allowed to put in an irrigation well in an area that's served by town water.
Well,
So, someone said that to me, I don't know if it's true or
I
not,
know
but.
in Methuen you can, because I work with an HOA
Okay,
that has many
I know, but-
watering wells.
but
So,
I would
was
also,
told that in North Andover, so
I would go a step further and say, to be quite frank, like, if this was instead of an apartment complex, if this was a bunch of single-family homes, they would be using more water than the apartment complex would, right? Like, this is not something that, like, their water does not scale with the number of residents in the unit, and so, to me, like, this is a non-issue, and I'm okay with deleting it.
Deleting it?
Yeah. Like, insofar as we have a drought in North Andover and it causes water conservation issues, it will not be because of this property, I'm quite confident.
If the purpose of this is just to keep the grass green and not keep a new landscape from dying, like, then I'm not worried about it.
Well, no, the point is to say that if they are going to water the lawn, that they not use our town water. And to me.
And this is like in general for the future, not just for during the.
Right,
initial
this is for
part.
all time. But to me, like, that's not a necessary requirement, because the water use is a fraction of the town's water
Yeah.
use is basically.
Yeah, I like the in accordance with the general bylaws.
The fire department concerns, that was just to highlight some changes, but nothing substantive versus the prior draft,
Okay.
other than to acknowledge the sweat path analysis and the fire department's, the date of the fire department's memo.
Okay, and then we've
Hydrant
got
spacing.
stormwater.
Is that from the fire department also?
All right, we got stormwater management. So, let's see. Any comments on numbers 83 or 84 here? There's a TBD by ZBA here about the town may perform necessary maintenance or repairs, and the applicant or successor hereby authorize the town to enter the property for the purpose. What-
Right, so this is something that, again, is entirely up to the board. Sometimes, all of this is going to remain private property, and the obligation of the property manager to make sure that the stormwater system is properly maintained, cleaned, in accordance with the O&M plan, anything of that nature. But sometimes things go wrong, and sometimes a property manager may fail to do what needs to be done to maintain these systems, and then it starts to have a domino effect on the town's stormwater control systems. So in some communities I've worked with, they have liked this language where the town has the ability to access the property and go in and make the repair if the property manager does not do so, and then we could place a lien on the property. I'm not advocating that you do it one way or the other. Where this is all going to be a rental property with a professional management company, I think it's very low risk that they are not going to maintain everything. But again, it was just putting the menu out there for you to choose from.
There are lots of rental properties out there that aren't maintained.
Yeah. And like I understand, it's not the same as like a private subdivision where you're dealing
Not
with
saying
like a dozen
theirs, but-
individual homeowners who would be responsible for maintaining it.
Right.
I mean, I would say that not only is this a rental property, but it is also a part of a larger complex, right? And so the odds that they let the whole thing go fallow, it seems like it would be a massive investment to abandon.
Yeah. So,
Right.
so there's very low risk the town will have to come on and do anything.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
At that point, then it's just words.
I mean, they might
Yeah.
Sell that to someone.
All right, parking, I think we've addressed most of the
did earlier
things that
tonight,
we need
yes.
to decide, so I think we've.
So make sure that's consistent with your prior discussion.
Yep. Markings, driveway and sidewalk to guide pedestrians. Yeah, that's something we discussed as part of the plan, right, is that we want to funnel pedestrians in a particular direction that is safe rather than going over fences and things like that.
Right.
All right, so,
And it does have a block in here about consulting with North Andover Police Department to ensure.
that's what I was gonna get to, yeah, so this is the, page 34, or we going?
Yes, page
Yeah.
34, 104.
Yep,
So you see 91 crossed out on page 34. That was the pedestrian safety review that VHB had proposed. The applicant has proposed the alternative paragraph 104, and that involves the motor vehicle crash reports and consulting with the police department at both 60% occupancy and 100% occupancy.
what are your thoughts on that, Mary? The distinction between the two?
I think I tended to agree with the applicant that I think VHB had a good concept of a plan, but I also recognize that their language is a little bit vague. That, just a pedestrian safety plan and discuss findings, well, what I might think is a pedestrian safety plan may not be what you consider it to be. So I think this was giving it a little bit more structure in terms of consulting with the police department, pulling the motor vehicle crashes of incidents involving pedestrians or bicyclists. And I think we get certain benchmarks in there so we understand what we're asking for.
And then 105, we've got,
I guess my question,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, is the results of the review will be summarized in a technical memorandum that will be submitted to the police department, DPW, and planning department. Summarized by whom, if not our peer reviewer?
It would be by their peer
And-
reviewer or their
Gotcha.
consultant of choice. We could also add in that it's to be reviewed by our traffic peer reviewer.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know how typically, do police departments, DPWs, and planning departments typically respond to private submissions like this promptly and with a lot of gusto, or, I don't know.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, I guess would it give more teeth to this whole idea to have our peer reviewer also look it over after they've created the report?
Sure. I think so.
And then post-occupancy traffic monitoring, so you make a note that Mr. Smolak and Mr. Steinberg and others have agreed to this as long as the scope of mitigation is limited.
Right.
Tree preservation plan, we've talked a little bit about this. Do you
This
have?
is the part that I requested that the tree protection zones be overseen by a certified arborist, not just by the contractor or the landscape architect.
So one of the questions here, I know you received a tree preservation plan of sorts tonight. Do you agree, or do you want to set a different caliber of tree, or do you accept the 17 or so trees that were identified to be preserved?
Yeah, I mean, on an off-the-cuff basis, sure. I'm not seeing any independent analysis, but part of the reason why it would be great to have this overseen by a certified arborist is that, if I did not measure whether or not the building plans fall within the 1.5 feet per inch of DBH that was specified in the tree protection plan, and there was a caveat in the tree protection plan that said, if a tree has to come down, then a certified arborist can say that it has to come down, but there was no caveat saying that a certified arborist would be in charge of the tree protection plan from the beginning. So You know, I don't think it makes sense to wait till someone has decided that a tree has to come down to involve an actual arborist. And I've seen a lot of tree protection plans that are not overseen by arborists where like a fence is put up and then 3 years of construction go by and the fence falls down in a snowstorm and it never gets put back up, and like, you know, being overseen by someone who is not a contractor or an architect is insurance that these trees won't just die immediately after construction.
So make that consistent with the tree preservation plan, because this condition was drafted before we actually received that plan, so.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Then we've got 107, 108. So 107, you've got, are any external sidewalks proposed, required, or improved in Prescott or High Street? I think that is unfortunately not in our purview. That is going to be the town's.
And the crosswalks and sidewalks on High Street are fairly good and new.
Yeah.
It's the Prescott.
And there's the question about permeable pavers. I think we probably let that one go just because I think the applicant is right, is that the stormwater plan has been built without them in mind, and that has been deemed acceptable.
I think
And
the
so,
permeable pavers is not about stormwater, it's about how it affects the trees or landscaping, but since none of the pavement is near mature or existing trees,
yeah.
I mean, it depends, I guess. I would have to look at the landscape plan in the courtyards maybe a little bit more closely. It is definitely possible that the trees that are chosen for the courtyard would benefit from having permeable pavers instead of whatever they're proposing in the courtyard. I confess I was a little more focused on the surrounding landscape and not on the interior landscape. But I do think also that the people that would be most affected if those landscape plantings inside the courtyard died would be the residents of this building. So probably behooves the managers to be nice to them and take care of the property that everybody is using.
I can comment just on 107 and 108. In terms of 107, the crosswalks internal to the site shall be raised. That'll interfere with our stormwater, so what I might suggest is crosswalks internal to the site shall be just painted and marked.
Clearly marked, yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of 107, the site has a net reduction in impervious surfaces, number one.
108, yes.
And number two, the pervious pavers. I think Phil had mentioned something about that on West Mill, and it didn't work out. It hasn't worked out well, and they can be a maintenance nightmare.
Yeah, and also the,
Yeah, I think we've already agreed that
decided
Okay.
we're gonna strike it.
Okay.
I don't think we have to dwell on this too
Okay.
long. But,
Yeah.
so you've won that one already. Accept the victory.
I guess it is implied here in 107 that we could request external crosswalks proposed or required to be improved on Prescott. So external being external to the site.
Correct.
Is that just in directly next to the site?
It would be like across High Street.
Well, this specifically mentions Prescott.
Yeah. or
Well, but
Prescott.
it butts Prescott too, so.
Right.
To the extent that you were requiring some related mitigation, you could consider something like that.
But just for the stretch of their own property that is along High Street, or Prescott, I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't go too far afield, but you might have a little bit of, flexibility beyond the limits of their site if you thought there was one, but,
I think it would also require consultation with DPW because, they aren't gonna want crosswalks just put anywhere, right?
No, I
And-
think I was more talking about a sidewalk. Like, if repaving
okay.
that sidewalk that's along Prescott from the beginning, I mean, obviously it wouldn't go all the way out to 125, but,
Sorry, yeah, because this is talking about crosswalks.
well,
This clause is crosswalks. They're, right, and so this was
Gotcha.
do we want to make them add a crosswalk? And I'm
Gotcha.
I don't feel good about asking for a crosswalk along Prescott, for example, because the pedestrian the pedestrian walkways don't point out onto Prescott. And so putting one there actually may cause more problems for traffic and pedestrian
More
safety
Pedestrian crossing.
than we actually want to create,
Yeah,
right?
there
Because
is
we want to
also-
kind of push pedestrians down the other way.
I believe there is also a crosswalk at the intersection of Prescott and High Street, correct?
Right, at that intersection
Yeah,
already,
Which
yes.
is very close to where,
Right, but I guess, I thought
Any-
you were
any
saying
part
like
of
further
this.
up Prescott Street, right?
oh, no,
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so
I'm not
either.
sure that would benefit anyone.
All right.
I conflated the two
yeah.
points into talking about sidewalks and crosswalks.
Yeah, unfortunately, the sidewalks, like I said, I don't think is really going to be our purview here, because that's going to
Yeah.
be, the DPW has a plan already to update those. Now, obviously, they can change their plan, but, and we have limited control over that, but that is part of their plan already. All right. Number 112 here on page 35.
Or 111.
So, well, 111 and 112. 111, I think it was just calling our attention to
One,
it.
right.
Yeah.
So 112 is something new that was added. And Attorney Smolak and I have had some discussions about this. And he requested that this be put in because there was a 1984 special permit that was issued that limited the height of the garage to just 2 decks.
On this specific garage? Is that what, okay.
Yes.
I was issued 33 days after I was born.
Before I was born.
Attorney Smolak wanted to request that, this comprehensive permit modifies that prior special permit decision. I've expressed to him that I don't think this is a necessary condition for 2 reasons. One is that, first of all, when it comes to waivers, under the comprehensive permit regulations, the applicant only needs to request a waiver from as-of-right requirements, not special permit requirements. So this isn't exactly a special permit requirement, but it is the product of a special permit process. I also think that by demolishing that garage and rebuilding this whole new project, we are effectively abandoning that prior special permit decision, and it's being superseded by this comprehensive permit.
I guess the question would be like, I agree that I think the comprehensive permit completely just overrides that entire previous thing, but in the very far off event, as I'm sure in 1984 this would have felt far off, would that lingering special permit on the lot in general ever affect like a revision or like a reconstruction of this site? Like, is it worth it to just get rid of that for the sake of cleanliness in documentation?
I would imagine, I won't speak for Attorney Smolak, but I would imagine that's part of the rationale for requesting that there is no question about the status of that 1984 special permit. And reasonable people can disagree, but like I said, I think a comprehensive permit would supersede that.
I guess
Can we modify a special permit that's issued by I don't know if it was a planning board or who it was at the time?
It was this board.
It was this
Zoning
board?
Yeah, I guess the question I keep asking on these kind of things is there any particular risk to us for including it? Or is it just kind of noise?
Well, what if they,
They tear this whole thing
what if
down
they
and
don't,
it's
what
just
if
a
they don't
garage again?
proceed with this project and come back with something else, that special permit will have been modified?
Can we put in a condition that on condition that the permit, that the construction is completed?
The comprehensive permit is actually exercised?
Yeah. Mr. Smolak, would you be okay with that?
Well, well, the other reason why we added this is because there's case law over the past 10 years that indicates conditions within any decision withstand a period of 30 years in terms of restriction. And so, and can last perpetually. So as an abundance of caution, that's why we're adding this in here to make it explicit.
But are you okay with that condition? As long as you guys do what you say you're gonna do?
Like upon completion of the project or
Yeah,
upon
on
issuance of the occupancy permit? Like, do we have to specify?
Some version of that, yeah.
Okay.
or upon demolition or something, might be appropriate.
I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen after demolition and before anything is actually committed to be built there in like a,
I mean, look, this is meant to be a clause that is never used,
Right.
right? Like, by all parties,
Right.
But I think, if you're gonna wanna include this to tidy up some loose ends, we'll wanna have our
Some
ability to tie up
assurances.
some loose ends too,
Mhm.
right?
Happy to have that discussion with Attorney Murray.
Not included.
Yeah. We can leave out the whole thing, but, I mean, presumably, the reality is that the likely outcome is it doesn't matter what it says and it doesn't matter what conditions we place on it because the comprehensive permit will override all of it anyways. But we
but
might
to
as
the
well.
point of like, if the financing falls through and this whole thing is demolished, but then
Yep.
cannot be built, and there's no restriction there on a parking garage,
Yep.
then, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's
But there
worth.
likewise isn't, if everything falls through on the financing, then this taller parking garage allowed under this permit doesn't exist either. So,
All right. The signage.
signage will be modified, now consistent with the plans we received
Yep.
earlier tonight.
And with sufficiently broad allowance for the content of the sign.
Yes, we will
Yeah.
not have signs that say signage.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right.
As Ms. Greg Coleman mentioned, there's a part of me that would enjoy that, but no,
Yes.
I'm not going to do that to the.
To the whole thing.
Yeah.
Become a tourist attraction of absurdity.
All right. I think that covers the full text. So, I guess my question is, and we still have some more things that I want to discuss here, but as we've discussed these revisions, this is a fair number of things that we want adjusted and changed. Right now, the plan is to meet on July 14th. I think, realistically speaking, I want to give the board enough time to look at this text, which means that if it could be ready by next Tuesday, that would be ideal. We have a holiday this weekend, a rather big one, and so I understand that puts a lot of strain. So, Mr. Smolak, I sort of have two possibilities here. One is that if you feel confident that we can get this out by next Tuesday, working with Ms. Murray, obviously, I'm okay with proceeding with that, and then the plan is to have a discussion on the 14th. The other option is that we continue, but it would be continuing until August. So it's a pretty big jump. And I think we would all like to avoid that. So I guess the question is this a achievable task here?
Well, I think it is. I think my largest task is just revising those waivers, as we discussed. I guess I don't see the harm of just keeping the hearing open in case something comes in, because you could always close it when you start the meeting on the
Yes.
14th, right?
I mean, right, realistically speaking, if I don't get a document from you by Tuesday, I'm going to be asking you for a continuance, for an extension, right? And so that's the rub, right? And so I want to be clear with that here
He's
in
not
this meeting.
confident that he can get it to us. Just a point of order, since Alex will no longer be voting, when you edit this, maybe we replace her name with Melissa.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, so Tuesday, 'cause that's 1 week before.
Right. I want to give us enough time to actually, pick up the document and read it.
So would the plan be, if he can get it to us by next Tuesday, come to the meeting on the 14th, speak for an hour, close public comment or meeting, and then we can discuss that night. And
That would be one possible outcome. Right, so there's three, we get three possibilities here as I see it. One is that the next meeting, exactly as you say, we have some discussion about it, we close the public comment, we deliberate, and we vote. Option two is that we have a longer meeting, we close public comment at the end there, and then that clock starts for 40 days for us to be able to vote. The third option is that we decide we still need more input from the applicant, in which case we do have to continue. And, you know, no matter what happens, I will ask Ms. Murray to prepare a continuance for us so that at least we can sign it and have it submitted by the next morning, because we you know, can go technically until the 15th, right? So those are our choices. But
I mean, I think it's mostly about whether you think that's.
I think we also need to keep in mind that we've just lost one of our voters, so now we're down to 5, and we can't lose anybody else, so.
We can actually. Technically speaking, so we need 3 yes votes. And if we only have 3 people that can vote and they all vote yes, that is sufficient.
This is not an invitation to either of you to
Yeah.
stop showing up to meetings.
Yes, please don't, because A, I value all of your input, but B, like, we need to, you know, I want us to have a full board. But your point is well taken, which is that the longer this goes, the harder it is to maintain a consistent attendance, especially through the summer. Right. And, you know, I'm sure Mr. Smolak is not interested in continuing this any longer than we have to. So, all right, I'm going to, I know that what I'm asking both from you and Ms. Murray is quite a bit. You know, please include me if anything needs immediate decisions or discussion. Insofar as I can, as chair, I will attempt to give feedback. You know, obviously there may be some things that I can't do, but hopefully I can do what's needed to make things happen. Okay, so along those lines, Mr. Killalay, you brought up some comments from neighboring abutters, right? And they have asked for additional studies and additional work to be done. And I think my standard on this always falls into 2 pieces. Well, in this case, falls into 2 pieces, right? One is the one that I always hold, which is the information we ask for going to materially change what we decide or how we decide, right? And so, are the things that are in those requests things that we would that would change your decision or would change significantly the conditions that we would want to place? And then the second piece is the reality of the 40B structure, which is that Mr. Smolak and Mr. Steinberg will likely not be willing to continue this forever. And the reality is that there is an infinite number of things we can talk about. Like, there's more that I would love to keep discussing, but like there's simply not a reasonable time constraint that we can't reasonably argue that we can continue this forever. And so the question I would have for the board is, are there additional things that meet the first requirement and that are defensible from the second perspective?
Are you asking me
I'm
to respond about
I'm asking
these?
all members. You're the
Yeah.
one who brought this up, but like, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's important to discuss this, right? Are there things that would materially impact what or how you would vote? And are they things that are important enough that we can make clear to the applicant that we must delay?
Well, they said no health report has been issued. I'm not sure what consultant does a health report on a parking garage. I haven't encountered that before.
A health report for the
No
proposed
health
garage.
impact report
No.
appears to
Yeah.
have been provided despite a plan to include a very large, dense concentration of vehicles in a parking structure. The town should hire an independent expert to advise on health considerations for nearby residents for that type of structure. I've done some parking structures and I've never hired, so I'm not sure how that is studied or anything about it, but I don't know.
We
Is
started
it?
this conversation with the, planning board admin who gave a lot of references for, I think, every single study that is typically done for a development. And there was not a reference to health study for parking.
Yeah, well, I mean, that doesn't mean that, I'm just,
I guess what I'm trying to say is this is sort of our last chance to say,
We need more information.
we really need this piece of information, or else we cannot move forward. And so, this is sort of your speak now or forever hold your peace moment, because
I guess they sort of, for me at least, fell into two categories. One is testing or reporting that was basically like, it just seems, unlikely that the expert reviewers that we have, that you all and that we have hired are representing the projections as they will actually happen. It's sort of like saying, like, it just doesn't seem likely that traffic won't be impacted more highly, or health won't be impacted more highly, or stormwater won't be impacted more highly. To me, we can only work on the mathematical models that we are given by experts. I am not comfortable introducing the town into a legal battle that goes in direct opposition to the information that we have already paid people to give us, that know more about this than any of us individually. The other thing that was talked about was a pro forma, which, correct me if I'm wrong, it is too late to do. Am I wrong about
Well,
that?
again, you've got 2 weeks until the public hearing closes.
Right.
I don't even think you could locate a consultant to review a
Right.
pro forma in that amount of time.
Let alone have the applicant prepare one.
well, and the other thing is that we need a basis by which to request that
Right.
pro forma, right? Like, and this is something that we've gone through multiple times, but like, there is not, basically, you would have to look at the waivers, right, as written, and declare that there's something that you don't want to approve, that you think that waiver is so, like, egregious that it overrides the statutory needs for housing and the outline, the intent of the 40B bylaw. And then if we say that, and then the applicant says, no, we cannot do that, we cannot afford it, that is when you would ask for a pro forma to prove that we can't afford it.
Yes.
Right.
I understand.
So the
Just in the context of things that had come up in a better
Right.
comment.
Right.
That was the only other thing besides additional testing to basically stress test the testing and
Right.
reports that we've already done.
And I mean this as much for the public as anybody, but like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that when you say pro forma, it is not simply like, show us your books, right?
Yes.
We are saying, like, this is the specific thing that we want to deny, and show us, like, why we have to accept it.
Right.
And so my question then to the board, more generally, is there an item in here that meets that standard for you? Right? And obviously, we will have a formal deliberation coming up, but that's the thing. And so, as an example of that, right, I felt that this property came much too close to 39 Prescott Street, right? And for me, that was one that was approaching that line where I was willing to say, this needs to stop and come back, or else I'm going to deny that waiver. And if they had said, no, we can't do that, that would have been something that I might have asked for a pro forma to say, then show me that you can't move it.
Right. The only other property line that I've had qualms about is that one along Prescott.
Yep.
It is hard for me to say when both of the closest abutters are equally distant. It is hard for me to say that I would fight for one
and not the other.
and not the other.
And also that it's across the street, which, like, I'm
Yeah.
sure for them does not feel reassuring, but
Yeah.
it is kind of a factor that would be considered, I think, on appeal.
That's true.
All right. With that, Mr. Smolak, I'm going to ask for some input from Mr. Shapiro and Ms. Murray. So you're welcome to take a break and relax for a little bit. Terry, I know that you have to leave at 10. We will likely go past 10 because I want to make sure we leave enough time for public comment here. So when that clock hits, you're welcome to just take off, and I'll make sure to clean up stuff and bring it downstairs for you.
One other item, I will, for the record, submit this. This is the existing sign that's out there today, so I'll submit that for the record for this evening.
Thank you. All right.
To be clear, is that sign going to be removed as part of this project, or
No,
it's going to stay?
It's to
right?
stay.
that's
Okay.
the one that's going to stay and be relabeled.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Shapiro. So I've asked, and at the last minute, so I appreciate his willingness to jump in here. Mr. Shapiro had presented to the select board last week on our subsidized housing inventory status, and so I asked him to provide us with a little perspective on where we are there. So.
So
please.
for the record, Andrew Shapiro, Assistant Town Manager, and that's correct. I did present this information a couple of weeks ago to the Select Board, sort of on a tangential topic. But we covered our status on with respect to 40B, and I'll try to move through this as quickly as possible, but I'm available for any questions. And we also have a lot of resources that are available here as well, between Ms. Murray and others. But our current subsidized housing inventory stands at a little over 8%. That's based on 2020 U.S. Census data. The denominator on which it's based, basically the total number of housing units that are calculated, that stays fixed for a period of 10 years, so that won't change until 2030, presumably, when the new census comes out. But the thing to take into consideration is that the figure doesn't take into account any recent developments that occurred after the U.S. Census came out. So that includes this project, if it were to be approved. It doesn't include 149 Main Street, 1591 Osgood Street, the Minko development, the Avalon projects that are in this area as well. So that actually means that our subsidized housing inventory, if it were to be recalculated today, you could assume that our number would be actually less than 8%. If you want to keep going, Terry.
Because all of those projects add to the denominator, but not the numerator.
Correct. That's right. Except for 0 Prescott Street, of course, if it were to be approved. So just looking at sort of our deficit, we have 11,872 existing housing units, so we need 1,188 units to qualify to get to 10%. We currently have 958 units. Which gives us a little over 8%, as I mentioned before. So we're about 230 units short of our requirement. The proposed project in this case, currently, I believe, is proposing 280 units, revised down from, I think it was 296, if I'm not mistaken. So in terms of 40B, all 280 units, despite the fact that only a certain number of them are going to be deed-restricted affordable, all 280 units would go on the subsidized housing inventory. So that would bring us 50 units above our requirement to 10%, 10.43%. So what this gets us is theoretical safe harbor in the sense that then we will be above 10%, but also in another sense that because we'll have increased our housing inventory by more than 1% over our total housing units, it'll allow us to certify our housing production plan, which grants a theoretical 2-year safe harbor. The thing to take into consideration here is some information that was provided by Ms. Murray at the last meeting, which is that's also all dependent on certain, phasing of units coming on the inventory. So we have a 1-year period of time where no matter what, we could theoretically declare safe harbor. Because the developer will have 1 year to pull to act on that permit before those units will then come off. unless the permit is acted upon. And then, of course, there's the issue of phasing. Like if a certain number of units are, the building permit is pulled for a certain amount of units, only those units will go on the SHI and other units will come off. So all to say, we'll have theoretically, we'll be just barely above our 10%. We don't have that much of a cushion. So our hold over safe harbor is somewhat tenuous until 2030 when the denominator would reset and we'll get a new data point there to take into consideration. And just to go on that, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. In terms of like increasing at least 1%, so like the phasing of this is basically half and half. It's like 140 something and one are the phases. Either side is
Would get us
over a
above
1%
1%,
increase, correct?
Yep.
So it would have to be like broken down even into more phases to not get us at least to the 2 years.
Agreed. So in other words, I would imagine we'll be above. I would imagine we'll be able to get to 2 years of safe harbor, but again, and Ms. Murray can correct me if I'm wrong on this one. The 2 years starts at the point at which we declare safe harbor after a project's approved. So if there's some gap in time when some amount of units aren't on the SHI,
You can dip back below.
it could dip back below, but we only get 2 years from when the project was approved, right? So it's not like we get to pause and the 2 years get stretched further. It's like 2 years total.
And not approved by us, approved by the building commissioner, like for a permit.
No, the moment you actually vote on the comprehensive permit, and as soon as that decision gets filed with the town clerk, you can immediately notify HLC and have this added to the SHI.
So it's a 2-year safe harbor, but a 3-year permit to build.
Right, they have 3 years to break ground.
Right. There's a theoretical
Gap.
gap.
And if you want to keep scrolling, Terry, I'll just cover the last bit, which is,
How do we not stay in a safe harbor until the new census comes out? Why is it only 2 years?
well, that's the 40B statute says that we would have 2 years based on a 1%, more than 1% increase in our total housing units.
So we're not in a safe harbor if we're just meet the 10% or over
So
that?
so you get the 2 years. 2 years from now is 2028. So for those the period after the 2 year period, it would be based on our SHI. So as long as we're above 10%, which we theoretically would be.
Oh, if they go ahead, if
Correct.
they build it.
But,
I gotcha.
But let's say, for instance, again, we're dealing in
So you're saying we're in
hypotheticals.
safe harbor even if they don't build it for a period of time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yes.
And then if they do build it, we're
But
good
only for
the-
2 years, but they
if
could
they-
take 3 years to
But if
do
they do build
it.
it, we're good to 2030. All right.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah, sorry.
So I cover some of that information here, and we already sort of discussed it. So actually, Terry, you can go to the last slide. Sorry. And this is just sort of looking further, into the future. And this is my own calculations. This is not from, EOHLC. This is really just purely projection based. And I'm just saying here that if you look further ahead, if you factor in Zero Prescott, the 280 units, but then you also factor in those other projects I mentioned before that weren't counted towards the denominator, just these projects, okay? So these are just, a combination of market rate developments and a few other developments that have some affordable units built into them because we now have a inclusionary zoning bylaw that requires 15% of units to be marked as affordable. That'll get us up to 12,571 total housing units. And if you divide the net new number of affordable units, 288 plus the existing 958, that gets us to 1246. And if you do the math, it gets us to 9.9. So in other words, you can project that we'll be under that. And this doesn't take into consideration all the other market rate units that are getting built that we kind of just don't have a good track of. So I'll give you an example. The state just came out with a report about how many housing units it's building. And last year, North Andover built, I believe it was 52 units of new housing, according to the state. So those 52 units, none of those were deed restricted affordable. And they weren't these units, exactly. So that's another 51 units that goes to the denominator.
Did you add the 8 affordable units from Main Street and Osgood Street?
Yeah, that's why it's 288 and not just 280.
Correct. So it's 5 units, 3 affordable units on 149 Main and 5 affordable units at 1591 Osgood. So the 280 units from this project plus those 8 additional affordable units.
Yep, so we'll be just under.
Right. And because our inclusionary zoning bylaw requires 15%, we can't count all of the rental units that are produced, even the market rate ones, part of the IZ, onto our SHI like we can with this project. So it's a challenge. And the last thing I'll just quickly mention is I've heard criticism that the town has reacted too slow with respect to putting it in force a inclusionary zoning bylaw. And I did the math, and unfortunately, even if we had an inclusionary zoning bylaw going all the way back to Princeton Properties, we would have not met the 10% threshold. So, it's one of those things where it's a nice thing to have, and I think it's certainly good practice, but it's not the
It's not a
silver
panacea.
bullet. It's not a panacea.
If we had it, then we might have still been safe. With this project, come 2030, we might have still been in the safe zone, though.
We would, just because with this project alone, we're safe.
No,
But
but come
I-
2030.
2030, yeah. I mean,
If
would
they
we
had-
get above 9.9 perhaps? Yeah. But it's not much cushion.
Because we'd only need 11 units,
Yeah.
11 more
Yeah.
units.
Well,
And
that's
if-
not including all of the single-family housing that's not really tracked on this, that's been added,
yeah,
which
so
is, I guess,
5, so we need 16 units. So if the Minco and.
I think it was 5 in a single year that were added, right?
52 last year.
52, so that would be 5 additional affordable units that would be
Yes.
needed.
Yep.
But that wasn't just in 1 year. In the census, it's 10 years
Yeah.
apart.
So it's hard to say with any great degree of certainty what that denominator is going to look like in 2030. Could be, well more than this. So all of this is just supposed to really just paint the picture that we don't have much wiggle room. That's all.
Yep.
It's the reality of the situation.
Thank you. Thank you
Yep,
so much.
you're welcome.
This is really helpful.
Yep.
All right. And Ms. Murray, we talked earlier last week, and you offered, and I definitely appreciate it, to outline for us what the process looks like for the decision-making, and then what is the aftermath, or prospective aftermath, given our different choices available in front of us. And so that would be really helpful.
Certainly. So we've been going through the last couple of meetings, waivers and conditions, and of course, a lot of this is based on an assumption that the project gets approved.
Yeah.
Not that that will necessarily happen, but
Yeah, thank you, Terry.
what, if there was any thought on the members of the board to deny the project, you need to remember what the standard is for denying. And unlike when you act on variances or other special permits, it's a different standard in that your decision has to be consistent with local needs. And that's a specific term of art under the 40B regulations that forces you to sort of evaluate your local requirements, be it your zoning bylaws, general bylaws, regulations, and enforcement of those as compared to the regional need for affordable housing. And as Mr. Shapiro just showed, you're vulnerable to a 40B because you are not in a safe harbor.
Can you help me
If-
understand a little bit? Because when we talk about local needs, right, like that, it sounds like, okay, well, this is imposing upon the community that meets the standard of local need. So how can we understand a little bit better what it means to be a local need?
So a local need, you have to identify some sort of local bylaw, local requirement, local regulation, something like, as you were talking about earlier, Mr. Chair, about it concerns you that this project was so close to 39 Prescott Street earlier in the design. And had they kept with that original design, they were going to need a setback waiver. Now, this board could have said, I realize there are others, but, focusing on that particular one, the board could have said, we have a setback requirement, and that setback requirement is designed to protect whether it is open space, whether it is just screening, buffering, landscaping between properties, particularly where you have residential versus industrial zones, that there are some underlying principles behind why do we have setbacks and not just allow everyone to build right up to property lines. We'd have to say that we feel that enforcement of our local bylaw somehow or other outweighs the need for affordable housing, and that would be one of the potential bases, if you will, for denial of the project. I will tell you that in my experience, when affordable housing projects are denied, particularly where a community is not in a safe harbor status, municipalities do not have much success at the Housing Appeals Committee, because that threshold of outweighing the need for affordable housing is a very high bar to get past, especially given the current environment of affordability concerns and housing needs across the state. There have been some successes for municipalities. I can tell you that in one community I worked with, they denied a 40B on the basis of a dead-end street without a secondary means of egress that required a waiver from their subdivision requirements. That denial was upheld. There have been master plans, like redevelopment plans for sites, that where a town has already undertaken a comprehensive planning of it was a former military base that was coming offline. And the communities were already deciding, this is where our commercial uses are going to go, this is where we're going to have housing, we're going to have single-family housing, this is where we'll have multifamily housing, including affordable housing. Because that planning process had already been underway when a 40B application came in and the town denied it on the basis of this planning, that's been upheld. There's been a case where if a septic system was going to generate too high a nitrogen load and was located too close to a private well, such that it could literally render somebody's drinking well perhaps not safe or not meeting DEP standards for nitrate levels in a well to render the well not drinkable. That's a valid local concern. There's a public health component or a public safety component that the town was able to articulate. It outweighs the need for affordable housing. So that's what you've got to bear in mind. The other thing to consider is that we've spent an awful lot of time over the last two meetings talking about conditions. And we'll take like the air quality monitoring, if that ultimately is incorporated into the construction management plan, for example. If you deny a 40B, those conditions don't exist. And if you deny a 40B and the Housing Appeals Committee ultimately overturns your denial, you don't get to include all of those conditions at that point. You're going to get the Housing Appeals Committee's standard conditions for, executing a regulatory agreement prior to issuance of a building permit, and it is, a few others that are just very, very bare bones, and I would almost say like industry standards. But you're not going to get anything that is very unique to this property. You wouldn't see something like the tree preservation plan, for example. So I just want you to bear that in mind. If you are inclined to approve the project, as you stated earlier, Mr. Chairman, it only requires a majority vote. So I only need 3 of you on both the waivers as well as the comprehensive permit. Even if it is approved, if the applicant feels that some condition in the decision is or potentially could render the project uneconomic, the applicant could still appeal even an approval on that basis. And of course, there is also the potential that abutters could appeal the decision as well. So did I cover everything you wanted, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, and I guess the one last piece, because I think it's important for the abutters to know. So what do the abutters appeal rights look like?
So the abutters don't appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee like the applicant would. Instead, the abutters appeal to either Superior Court, Land Court, their choice. There is typically a bond requirement that the court can impose. That's a relatively new requirement, and sometimes it's required, sometimes it is not. And then the applicant, the abutters need to be able to articulate, similar to how the zoning board would, if you were trying to claim that there was a basis for denial, that there would have to be some sort of property interest or some interest that the zoning bylaw or general bylaws of the town were designed to protect, such as, sufficient screening and landscaping and setbacks, that somehow or other that was not adhered to by virtue of the zoning board's decision, and that they have suffered some substantial harm by the issuance of this permit.
Any other questions from folks?
So you said that if it gets denied and they appeal to the state, that some of the tree preservation may not happen. Would also like the step backs of the building, could he go back to his original design and go back to 296 and go back to the 16 feet from 39 Prospect?
Typically, what the Housing Appeals Committee is actually looking at is what is it that the board denied? So it would be the most recent or the latest revision to the plans that existed. Could the applicant, though, make an argument that the reduction in the number of units renders the project uneconomic? I suppose that's possible. I don't want to get into why I think there's some weaknesses with that argument, but is that possible? Sure. I think
the weakness would be that an alternative was proffered voluntarily.
that would be
Yeah.
the weakness. We didn't impose this. I mean, there have, in other instances, there have been zoning boards of appeals who will issue issue a comprehensive permit and will just, I don't want to say arbitrarily, because I'm sure they didn't feel it was arbitrary, but will just reduce the number of units for whatever their reasons may be, without necessarily considering all of the financial implications of the units and the reduction of those units. To your point, that is not what happened here. The applicant voluntarily offered to reduce those units. So if that's ultimately what this board denies, that would be what the Housing Appeals Committee would be considering. I think if the applicant then tried to revert back to a prior plan or perhaps even a different design, I think the Housing Appeals Committee would be likely to consider whether to remand that back to the board, because that's not exactly what you denied.
But regardless, all the conditions would be, I mean, in theory, they could do them, but they
But all the stuff around the edges, basically, right?
are not.
When I've defended denials, the Housing Appeals Committee has this quirky little way that when you're submitting your briefs, they say, now, not that we are telegraphing whether we're going to uphold or reverse the zoning board's decision, but in the event that we're inclined to reverse the zoning board, if you'd like to propose some conditions to us that you would like us to consider, we'd be happy to take a look at them. And every single time, the developer's attorney fights every single one of those conditions, and you might get one or two that the Housing Appeals Committee preserves for us, but you're certainly not going to get 112 of them as you saw tonight.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Judy, do you have anything else that you want to jump in with? I feel like that was pretty comprehensive, but if there's anything else, please feel free to jump in.
No, I think that covered everything just fine. My only comment that I had wanted to offer tonight was on veterans preference, but I think it's already been covered.
Okay. All right. All right, well, with that, I would like to open up the floor for public comments. Let me get the sheet. All right, so first up, we have Kelly Sarney at 39 Prescott Street.
Mr. Chair and fellow board members, in the PEL, Mass Housing states North Andover needs the 230 units to get to 10% based off of the August 2025 data. After looking at the floor plans, floors 1 to 4 get 225 units. We are sure with minor changes they could find room for 5 more units. With that, they would get the 230 units in 4 stories. This would meet Subdistrict A Purpose B, E, and I. It will not restrict as much airflow due to changes in wind patterns or produce as much stagnant air. It would be considered appropriate density for the new development, and it would visually and functionally not produce conflicts between the abutting district. It also would meet site and design standards letter K. A 4-story building will blend at least better into the visual character of the neighborhood. It is interesting that the design recommendations from the state based on the developer's conceptual plan have not been made public. To my knowledge, North Andover doesn't have any residential buildings over 4 stories. Allowing 5 stories with this project opens the town up for future 5-story buildings. We feel this is a reasonable request, which we highly doubt is economically infeasible. And if they say it is infeasible, the pro forma should be done. I don't care, 2 weeks is not enough. We do not believe Mass Housing would overturn this as we get to 10%. It is unfortunate that North Andover feels everything needs to be built in this area of town. Almost 600 units have been built since 2019, all in that same area. And there is the 24 on Main Street, the 38 on Osgood, now 124 at China Blossom. This area of the town's infrastructure, water, noise, and traffic will be made worse. We guess having F ratings and going from B to C ratings in 10 years is okay with the town. The residents affected by this deserve the request of 230 units and 4 stories. Mass Housing would approve it as it gets to the 10%, and the town does get a safe harbor. Hopefully, the town has learned a lesson from this and won't subject other taxpaying residents with a burden like we have to endure. We are not denying the project. We want and need the housing. Mr. Shapiro stated all the recent developments. The biggest question is the Minko was originally a 40B project. Instead, we got more housing in a senior center. The inclusionary bylaw, yes, was brought up in the planning board meeting minutes in 2019 by Jean N. Wright, and it was not discussed again until 2021. Interestingly, didn't get put up as an article until 2022. I am sure this was presented due to the new plans at China Blossom, Mr. Shapiro's presentation. I'm sorry, but the town dropped the ball, and we don't have to make up for the town's mistakes. You are asking us to make up 2% and still be behind. Ask the town to carefully plan ahead for future developments. Thank you. And I have one question. When you guys were going through all those conditions, on number 28, I'm sorry which one. I think it was when Mr. Killalay was talking about asbestos. It triggered me to ask if it means our radon levels rise in our home, because we do have a mitigation system, and if it requires us to have to re-mitigate our system, we would want compensation to update our system. That should not be on us when they disrupted the flow. Thank you.
Next up, we have Jim Holland, 43 Mount Vernon.
Chair Liz, Vice Chair Craig Coleman, members of the committee. I'm concerned that the parking structure may require zoning relief that has not been clearly identified on the waiver list. If the structure is not permitted as of right, the applicant should be required to seek a specific waiver and justify the request on the record. I'm not an expert in this, but perhaps it relates to 121 that was put on the conditions list. That might be better suited to be asked for as a waiver rather than a condition, but again, I don't know how it works. I disagree with the interpretation of the three-phase 2023 Downtown Overlay Subdistrict A Historic Mill Area Framework. Uncertainty regarding the timing does not negate the representations about the number of units, which was the primary indicator of the project scale. The planning board's review occurred in the context of those scale representations. The board should consider whether that review would have been the same had Phase 3 been described as 280 units and a 362 vehicle 5-story parking garage. The difference in scale is substantial and should require specific waiver relief or equivalent review. I do not believe the environmental and conservation review has been sufficient to date. There's been one report from the applicant responding to a wetland the town discovered near the garage. It was not peer-reviewed, and there are no reports about the full site. If the board is exercising conservation-related responsibilities in this proceeding, it should retain a qualified independent expert to review the full site. No health impact report, I'll out myself here. No health impact report appears to have been provided despite a plan to include a very large, dense concentration of vehicles in a parking structure. I don't know why the health department has been involved. I'm not actually sure who the health department director is at this point, but I believe that that should get an answer. The town should hire an independent expert to advise on health considerations for nearby residents for this type of structure and siting. If the board is inclined to approve the application, it should impose specific, measurable, and enforceable conditions related directly to the applicant's projections. Their projections have essentially shown that they think there'll be very little impact of this building. The board should really hold them to that, and if they need to update their projections, they should do that. The conditions include a process for should include a process for periodic review of actual impacts and a mechanism for town cost recovery from the applicant if the actual impacts exceed what has been projected. I don't see that in the current conditions. Finally, the process should not be accelerated due to scheduling constraints. The public has not had adequate time to review and comment on the final proposed waivers and draft conditions. We've been going through them tonight, and they're still redlined and marked up all over the place. I respectfully request that the board keep the public hearing open and not close the record on this 40B application until the public has had a meaningful opportunity to review and comment on the final waiver requests, final draft conditions, and supporting materials. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Murray, so this goes back to our discussion regarding the Avalon thing a little bit, but it was, Mr. Holland mentioned that if the previous boards had known that the plan for this lot was 280 units, that they might not have approved the previous special permit. I think my understanding is, for better or for worse, the order of operations matters here. That that it's probably true if the 40B had come that they might have had a different evaluation of that whole thing, but unfortunately that's not the way that the law works in terms of the way it's reviewed. Is that a reasonable statement?
Yes.
Okay.
I also wanted to ask, both zoning tables were considered in the waiver list. So even if there had not been a zoning overlay, the previously existing zoning tables that would have existed without the overlay are also considered in these waivers.
That's correct, right. I think what Mr. Holland was saying, and it is again similar to what was discussed around Avalon, is that there was a special permit granted with a plan for the site that involved a certain set of circumstances, and that those circumstances have changed. So that, does that require revisiting that original permit? And the answer, the Avalon, and then also the historic district permit related items. And so, what Ms. Murray said with regards to the Avalon specifically was that no, it did not, because that's not the way that this law is structured.
Yeah, we can't ask them to tear down the building.
Well, and we cannot revisit old previous decisions based on this new one coming in.
Right.
It's not sort of how it works, for better or for worse.
Could I ask just very,
Yeah.
or ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
And I would have to, I'll have to direct it to you, of course.
Yes, please.
In Ms. Murray's response, she will not have this in front of her, but in the last paragraph, it sounded to me, and this may be the case, that a waiver would be required in any event. I mean, even if,
I believe, and I'll give Ms. Murray a chance to clarify
Sure, yeah.
after we're
but
done.
that they would have to request a waiver to get out of that deal that they negotiated, or to get out of that.
Yeah, I don't believe that, I believe the case, that it was that there's no additional waiver, that the waivers that are requested would supersede those by definition. But maybe, Ms. Murray, you can help me out here.
Well, I think we need a little clarity as to what exactly we're referring to, because if you're talking about my prior opinion, there was what had been Phase 2B or Phase 3, however, it's changed over the years. And at one point, the garage parcel, as it was referred to, was discussed that something I want to say off the top of my head, it was maybe 81 units was
89.
contemplated for it, right? But it was never part of a planning board decision. It's almost like, as we'd call in the legal profession, in a decision, it's dicta. It's just something that was discussed, but not something, there was never a permit that was issued that specifically committed the developer to that, or that the town conditioned that project. Instead, what they chose to come back with was a 40B, as opposed to something that was consistent with what they had previously contemplated for the site. And there's nothing that stops them from choosing this path, as opposed to going back to the planning board for, another special permit under your existing zoning.
Gotcha.
So maybe to drastically simplify it in a different way is like, in a regular variance application, when we're voting on a decision, reference specific plans, but anything that is included in their application that we did not reference is not included in our decision. So is that basically like the plans, potential plans for this site were submitted as part of previous applications, but they were not referenced in the final decision? Is that what you're?
I think that's a decent analogy, but this is even going beyond that, that there was no plan submitted to the planning board for this. And in fact, the same decision where they mentioned, at a future phase, the developer's proposing, 80-plus residential units here. The same decision went on to say, but that will require further action by the planning board.
So, right, so we didn't actually even approve those number of units. It was saying, that could happen, we'll discuss it later.
And even if the planning board had issued a special permit for residential units on this site, the applicant didn't exercise that.
Right, and it's been
And
used.
there's nothing that would stop them from saying, again, we've changed our minds, we now want to do a 40B project there instead.
All right, thank you. All right, that is the folks who have written down on the list. Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to come forward and speak?
Michael Ronayne, 24 Prescott. Just really quick, just wanted to say 100% agree with Mrs. Sarney and how she's looking at it. I mean, I think the sentiment from the beginning has been it's overkill. and you can accomplish, what's trying to get accomplished without going absolutely insane with it. And regarding stuff like maintaining the tree protection plan or whatever the name for it is, none of that is along the backsides that face along Prescott. I mean, none of the trees that would provide cover to any of the other houses are being maintained. I mean, they're planting 10 to 12-foot trees, and by the time they could potentially grow halfway up the building would probably be 30 years. If they can, have the ability to do that with, I think they said, 17 to 19 feet of space. So, I mean, it doesn't seem, it's anything's being done aside from they moved it away from building on top of someone's house practically. And just considering what is done for other people, I mean, nothing has been done for 24 Prescott. It's upsetting. So, I mean, a 110-foot building, there's going to be 10-foot trees next to it. That's all.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come up? All right. Well, I think we have an order of operations. Ms. Murray or Mr. Smolak, is there any additional clarification that you need before? Because I'm afraid I'm leaving you guys with most of the work for the next week.
My only question is, your deadline on Tuesday, is that Tuesday at 5 or is that Tuesday at 9 a.m.?
Question. Let's put it this way. If Terry comes in on Wednesday and it is in her and my hands,
Thank you.
I can work with that. And actually, Terry doesn't come in on Wednesday, but I still want it in by Wednesday so that I can start distributing it at least digitally to the board, and we have as much time as possible. And I want to make it clear, I understand that this is kind of a crunch, and I apologize in advance for creating that, but I think we're coming down to the deadline, and I think we all want to finish this up as soon as we can. So I appreciate that effort. Mr. Smolak, are you okay with meeting on the 14th?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I've clarified that because you are now invited to that meeting. Okay. Do we have a motion to continue?
Well, Frank, you cleared your throat. Did you have something else to, or were you just?
Oh, no. I didn't even realize.
That's okay, I just thought you wanted to.
It's a good question. My head was in the other direction.
If the goal is to really try to button this up, in terms of at least having documents to vote on.
Yeah.
This is sort of like a speak now or forever hold your peace sort of moment.
It is.
So. Any feelings? Melissa, you still with us?
I am 100% still with you. But as you see, I've had to go to the hat. I'm 100% still with everybody. I feel very much like we're getting closer. I've listened to the arguments and the presentation and the information and gotten some questions answered for myself and suddenly discovered that I'm voting, which was very strange.
That's why you got to be ready.
That's why I'm here. So I think getting it to the final state and getting that moved ahead is the next step. Or at least for me, it's the next step.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to continue till July 14th.
At 7 p.m. at Town Hall.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And I am an aye. We are adjourned.